Chapter 2294, Medium Fortress. The regional announcement repeated 3 times, its content stunning the players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range. The northern fortress has been captured? What's going on? Isn't the northern fortress the largest fortress in the northern region? Are you kidding me? Zero Wing actually took down the northern fortress? Is Zero Wing really so powerful? Practically every player in the Gravity Mountain range knew about the northern fortress. It was one of only 3 medium fortresses in the Gravity Mountain range and a hot topic among players. Thus far, the only power to secure a fortress the Gravity Mountain range was 13 thrones, but the guild had only claimed a small fortress. Taking into account the number of players on Dragonheart Island, a small fortress wasn't enough to satisfy demand. A medium fortress, on the other hand, was several times larger. Now that Zero Wing had captured the northern fortress, players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range wouldn't have to worry about a safe place to rest and recover. Everyone had assumed that the first power to capture a medium fortress would be one of Dragonheart Island's super guilds, yet Zero Wing had accomplished the feat. No one had expected this outcome. However, the masses' shock was nothing compared to how stunned the island's various powers were over the news. How is this possible? That's the northern fortress we're talking about. How could a guild like Zero Wing possibly capture it? Start an investigation. I want to know every detail of the event. Not even 13 thrones dared to assault the northern fortress. Zero Wing must have used some special method to capture it. If we can learn this method, the rest of the Gravity Mountain range's fortress will be ours. The various powers knew just how difficult these fortresses were to capture. Many of the island's superpowers had attempted such operations, only to fail. These powers also knew what kind of guild Zero Wing was. Even with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's help, capturing the northern fortress should have been impossible for Zero Wing. If it were that easy, the various super guilds would have already occupied every fortress in the map. Zero Wing must have used some tool or special method to succeed. Meanwhile, a report regarding Zero Wing's success in capturing the northern fortress quickly made it to Melancholy's desk in the 13 Thrones Dragonheart City residence. Interesting. I hadn't really thought that they'd succeed, Melancholy commented, surprised as he read the initial report. As 13 Thrones Guild leader, Melancholy knew better than anyone on Dragonheart Island how challenging the Gravity Mountain range's fortress were to capture. When he had first heard of the operation, he had assumed Zero Wing was going for broke, hoping it would work out somehow. The Warblood adventurer team was still going mad over trying to destroy the guild, after all. Guild leader, now that Zero Wing has captured the northern fortress, it will gain more influence on Dragonheart Island. Many powers will likely try to ally with the guild. Should we? Happy Art carefully asked Melancholy while eyeing Elder Wu. Elder Wu had been a strong advocate for their guild's relationship with Starlink since the superpower could be so helpful in capturing the Gravity Mountain range's fortresses. And yet, Zero Wing had successfully claimed the northern fortress, a feat that not even 13 thrones had the strength to accomplish. Naturally, a medium fortress would offer far more and better benefits than a small fortress, and the various major powers already saw Zero Wing as a tempting ally. If 13 thrones waited until other powers had allied with Zero Wing first, it would lose a significant amount of potential profit. Happy Art, you reach conclusions too quickly, the masked woman behind Elder Wu spoke up. Although Zero Wing has the northern fortress, capturing it is a lot easier than defending it, especially now that the guild has angered both Starlink and Warblood. If we negotiate a partnership with Zero Wing, and it failed to defend the fortress, our guild will be in an awkward position? Happy Art fell silent for a moment. Other powers might not know much about the Gravity Mountain range's fortresses, but 13 Thrones was very familiar with them. It was true that defending a fortress was far harder than capturing one. 13 Thrones had gone as far as stationing a large number of experts in the fortress long-term to protect it from periodic monster attacks, even utilizing a few of the guild's trump cards. Needless to say, even stronger monsters would assault a medium fortress. If Zero Wing couldn't protect the northern fortress during one of these monster attacks, the consequences would be dire. That kid has exceeded my expectations, but we should see if Zero Wing can defend the fortress before we make a decision, Elder Wu said. It won't be too late to negotiate a partnership once Zero Wing proves that it can hold the northern fortress. Elder Wu then stood and left the room. He didn't linger in the guild leader's office any longer. While Dragonheart Island's various superpowers discussed Zero Wing's success, Xiaofan and his team were busy clearing the undead mobs out of the northern fortress. Capturing a monster-infested fortress wasn't the same as capturing a monster-infested town. Once a town's guardian boss was defeated, the remaining monsters would flee and disappear. However, in monster-infested fortresses, players had to kill the remaining monsters after defeating the guardian boss and claiming the fortress. Fortunately, once the monsters were dead, they wouldn't respawn. Guild leader Black Flame, we should have these undead mobs taken care of in a few more hours, Phoenix Rain reported. Worriedly, she continued, however, according to the information I've recently received, Warblood and Nine Dragons Emperor can no longer sit still. Not only have they locked down the Gravity Mountain range, but they've also begun to gather forces to capture the Northern Canyon's Rock Nest Fortress. Although the Northern Fortress was the largest in the Gravity Mountain range's northern region, its location was remote. In reality, the Northern Fortress wasn't that attractive to players. Fortunately, there weren't encarad areas for players in the Gravity Mountain range, excluding 13 Thrones Small Fortress. Players would have no choice but to visit the Northern Fortress, regardless of how remote it was. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, if another fortress in the northern region were captured, that situation would change, especially if it were the Rock Nest Fortress. The Northern Canyon, where the Rock Nest Fortress was located, was the sole path leading to the Gravity Mountain Range's northern region. If Warblood captured it, it would severely affect the Northern Fortress's popularity. They have the right idea. We've just captured the Northern Fortress and still need some time to clean it up. If they can stop the flow of players and resources from reaching our fortress, they'll weaken the Northern Fortress's development speed. We might not even survive the first wave of monsters, Xiaofan said, chuckling. Unfortunately, they don't know what it means to own a medium fortress. After his comment, Xiaofan approached one of the destroyed defensive magic towers. There was a strict divide between the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses. A medium fortress wasn't just larger than a small fortress, it also had defensive magic towers. These towers were the main reason why medium fortresses had a qualitative advantage over small fortresses. Chapter 2295, Peak Construction. As he stepped into one of the dilapidated defensive magic towers, Xiaofan used the fortress management token he had obtained to call up the four towers' combined system interface. Sure enough, repairing the towers will cost a ton. Xiaofan was astonished when he saw the repair cost for the four towers. If he wished to repair all four defensive magic towers, he would have to pay a total of 320,000 magic crystals and 120 units of 7 luminaries crystals. Zero Wing could afford the 320,000 magic crystals. After all, the guild had full control of a manatite vein and an attributed ore vein. It earned more magic crystals than an ordinary superpower. Unfortunately, the 7 luminaries crystals weren't as common. Although 7 luminaries crystals dropped in certain team dungeons and maps, the drop rate was painfully low. Even now, Zero Wing had barely saved up 200 units. He would have to part with more than half of Zero Wing's stock if he wanted to repair all four defensive magic towers. In the end, however, Xiaofan gritted his teeth and accepted the cost. Only medium fortresses and larger had the privilege of using defensive magic towers, and these towers were not limited to creating a defensive magic array to protect the fortress from invaders. They could also gather and concentrate the fortress's mana, as well as act as a teleportation point. Players couldn't rely on return scrolls or guild transfer scrolls to return to a rest area while in the World Tower. They'd have to rely on their own feet to travel back and forth. Of course, players could rely on land or flying mounts, but this was a lot more difficult than using a return scroll. Players would have to conserve some of their stamina for the return trip, which limited how long they could grind. Meanwhile, the defensive magic towers could nullify some of the World Tower's suppression, and players could connect return scrolls to the tower's teleportation point. This way, players could teleport to the defensive magic towers freely. Although the defensive magic towers were only effective on their own floor, meaning that players couldn't teleport to the fortress after descending to the next underground floor, these towers had been immensely popular during Xiaofan's previous life. Every floor in the World Tower was massive, and traveling across them was inconvenient. Because of the defensive magic towers, the World Tower's medium fortresses could make more profit than their smaller counterparts. Aside from profiting from visiting players, medium towers could also earn money from NPCs through the defensive magic towers. These towers significantly increased a fortress's defensive value, and NPC merchants, who disliked risk, would only visit fortresses with a high enough defensive value. Naturally, there was a massive difference between player-generated profit and profit earned from NPC merchants. Although ancient coins were Dragonheart City's only currency, players generally spent ancient copper and ancient silver. They rarely spent ancient gold. This was why 13 Thrones had earned much ancient gold since capturing a small fortress. However, NPC merchants were a different story. If an NPC merchant rented one of a fortress's shops, they'd pay with ancient gold. The more NPCs that visited a fortress, the more ancient gold a fortress's ruling power would earn. Xiaofan desperately needed ancient gold. His desire for it had become even greater after defeating the ancient fiend-ranked undead king. Normally, a fortress's bosses only dropped average loot. That was clear based on the loot the mythic-ranked undead general had dropped. Compared to the boss's loot, the fortress itself was the true prize. Aside from the fortress management toke, the undead king had dropped an extremely rare item. The Freedom Hotel design. Xiaofan had thought he was hallucinated when he had seen the design. The Freedom Hotel was a peak construction in God's domain. Meanwhile, and it was even more valuable than a fragmented legendary item. For a guild city to become a main city, it needed a peak construction, thus, owning the design for one was akin to obtaining a main city. Furthermore, a peak construction's abilities were out of this world. If he could construct a Freedom Hotel, he could elevate Stone Forest City into an intermediate city. The difference between an intermediate city and a basic city in a level 100+ map was like the difference between heaven and earth when it came to helping players complete their Tier 3 promotion quests. Of course, building a peak construction was extremely difficult. Every required material was exceedingly rare in God's domain, and many of them couldn't be stored in a player's bag space. The precious boundary stone was one such example. One could only find a boundary stone by luck. The only place that sold them was the black market, and each stone cost 8,000 ancient gold. Meanwhile, constructing the Freedom Hotel required 3 boundary stones, and including the cost of the other materials, the Freedom Hotel's construction would cost at least 40,000 ancient gold. Moreover, organizing a large-scale mining operation for the Gravity Mountain Range's rare ore veins would be a massive ancient gold expense. The ore veins in the World Tower were crawling with monsters, especially at night. Every ore vein in the World Tower was practically a monster nest. Even expert teams would be annihilated if they weren't careful. A small-scale operation wouldn't be a problem, but to set up a large-scale operation, one would need to construct a mine and defensive structures, both of which cost ancient gold. If Xiaofan wanted to develop Zero Wing in the World Tower quickly, he needed ancient gold. Time passed quickly. While Xiaofan and the others slew the remaining monsters and repaired the fortress's various buildings, a system announcement reached every player in the map. Gravity Mountain Range Region System Announcement. Congratulations to the Warblood Adventurer team for capturing the Rock Nest Fortress and becoming its lord. Guild popularity in Dragonheart City increased by 5,000. The system announcement caused another uproar throughout the Gravity Mountain Range. What? Zero Wing has just captured the Northern Fortress, yet Warblood has already captured the Rock Nest Fortress? Warblood really is vicious. With 2 fortresses in a single region, Zero Wing won't be able to generate as much income from the Northern Fortress. To make matters worse, the Rock Nest Fortress occupied the path to the Northern region. That's nothing. Warblood has also allied itself with quite a few of Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams. They're going to work together to seal off the Northern region. They've declared that anybody who visits the Northern Fortress will be considered one of the adventurer team's enemies. How vicious. Even with a fortress, Zero Wing has no hope of surviving in Dragonheart City. Zero Wing can only blame itself for provoking so many of the island's powers. The players grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range were astonished by how fast and decisively Warblood had captured the Rock Nest Fortress. They hadn't expected the adventurer team to strike down Zero Wing as soon as it had some success on Dragonheart Island. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, what should we do, Big Sis Rain? Blue Phoenix paled when she read the latest report. Because of Warblood's declaration, players that had been preparing to visit our fortress are backing out due to fear. Maintaining a fortress wasn't easy. They'd have to station players here long-term to deal with the occasional monster raids. Meanwhile, players were a fortress's main source of income. If players weren't willing to visit the Northern Fortress, they'd be lucky not to hemorrhage money on the fortress's upkeep. How did they secure the Rock Nest Fortress so quickly? Phoenix Rain's expression darkened when she heard the news. Although she had known that Warblood planned to capture the fortress, she hadn't thought that it would succeed so soon. Why don't we go teach them a lesson, guild leader Aqua Rose suggested in a chilly tone after reading about Warblood's threat. Forget it. Their fortress is under a 3-day protection period. Attacking them would be meaningless right now, Xiaofan said, shaking his head. Chuckling, he continued, however, since they want to play, we'll play. Spread the word that whoever visits the Rock Nest Fortress will be declaring Zero Wing an enemy. None of them will be allowed through the Northern Fortress's gates. Chapter 2296, Fortress opens Gravity Mountain Range, Rock Nest Fortress. The Rock Nest Fortress stood atop the northern canyon. From afar, it looked like a nest, which was how it had earned its name. The fortress was easy to defend and difficult to attack. However, the fortress was filled with tens of thousands of level 85+ players that were busy slaying the fortress's prior residents, the Blackstone Ores. Several tens of thousands of Blackstone Ores had garrisoned the fortress, but less than 10,000 remained. Lying quietly in the fortress's heart was the 4-meter-tall Ore King, and all sorts of weapons, equipment, and materials were scattered around its corpse. I hadn't thought that capturing a fortress would be this profitable. It's no wonder why 13 Thrones is so eager to capture a second one, 9 Dragons Emperor said, sighing ruefully as he gazed at the items on the ground. Even in the Gravity Mountain Range, Great Lord rank and higher monsters were relatively rare, yet the Rock Nest Fortress had been home to tons of them. Since this was the first time these monsters had been slain, their drop rate was much higher than the monsters that wandered the map. Clearing out the Blackstone Ores had yielded over 10,000 weapons and equipment pieces. Moreover, every item as level 90 or above. There were even some level 100 weapons and equipment among the loot. Although most of the weapons and equipment were only secret silver rank, with a few fine gold rank items, it was more than enough to serve as interim equipment. At the very least, his subordinates could use these items to start raiding level 90 super large-scale team dungeons as soon as they were the appropriate level. It's only natural. Every fortress in the Gravity Mountain Range is a treasure trove. We had planned to work with Starlink to capture a medium fortress, but I hadn't expected Zero Wing to claim the northern fortress successfully. We had no choice but to move forward with our plans, Blood Oath said. His voice cold, he continued, even with the northern fortress, I'll ensure that Zero Wing has no place on Dragonheart Island. That's right. That Zero Wing is too arrogant. They look down on you, Commander Blood, Nine Dragons Emperor said, nodding. I suspect the guild's members have already begun to panic. Without any visiting players, even the best fortress in the world is useless. War Blood, Crimson Shadow, and Night Sword, 3 of Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams, had agreed to work together against Zero Wing. Not a single adventurer team on the island would dare cross these 3. Furthermore, War Blood and Starlink were collaborating to seal off the northern region. Anyone that dared to explore the area would be making a one-way trip. Aside from Zero Wing's members and Phoenix Rain's subordinates, no one would visit the northern fortress. They had ensured that the northern fortress would be nothing more than a bottomless pit, steadily devouring Zero Wing's funds. The Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses weren't like the fortresses in the outside world. Monster attacks were more frequent here. Maintaining a small fortress cost enough of a fortune to give superpowers a headache, not to mention a medium fortress's maintenance, and that was excluding the subsidies a power would need to pay the players that guarded the fortresses. While Nine Dragons Emperor and Blood Oath conversed, a woman with an ancient bow approached. Commander, Zero Wing has made a move. They've mimicked out declaration, announcing that any player that entered the Rock Nest Forest will have no place in the northern fortress, Ink Feather announced, smiling as she read the report she had just received. They're trying to compete with our influence on Dragonheart Island? Black Flame is a fool. Does he really think Dragonheart Island is the same as Starmoon Kingdom? Blood Oath laughed. Commander Blood, I doubt that Black Flame knows that we found a mana well in the Rock Nest Fortress. Otherwise, he'd have never made this decision, Nine Dragons Emperor said, smirking. The mana well was the Rock Nest Fortress's exclusive construction. Although repairing it would deplete their liquid funds, the mana well's effects were well worth the cost. With this mana well, players could fully recover their stamina and concentration within half an hour. The mana well's effects would tempt every player grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range. The main reason that players visited fortresses was to rest and recover their stamina and concentration, and for the cost of 1 ancient gold coin, players could make a full recovery within 30 minutes. Countless players on Dragonheart Island would seek this benefit. As news of the mana well spread, even the players that visited the 13-throne small fortress would likely shift their attention to the Rock Nest Fortress, not to mention the powers that were considering setting up a base in the northern fortress. Since Black Flame is so eager to die, I don't mind sending him to his grave. Turning to Ink Feather, Blood Oath commanded, Ink, quietly inform the various major powers on Dragonheart Island of the mana well. I'm sure they'll know what to do once they receive the news. Understood. Ink Feather grew even more eager to see Xiaofan despair. Unless they were stupid, the various powers would recognize the most beneficial fortress once word of the mana well spread. Meanwhile, in 13 Thrones residence in Dragonheart City, Zero Wing thinks that it can suppress War Blood just because it has captured a medium fortress? The guild still isn't aware of how foolish it's being, Elder Wu, who rested in his office, said as he read the report his subordinate had sent. 1000, have Lu Xinglua pay me a visit. Tell him that it's about capturing a medium fortress. Understood. The masked woman named 1000 Lives smiled and nodded. In her opinion, Zero Wing was extremely foolish. The guild simply didn't realize how powerful superpowers foundations were. Elsewhere, in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress. While Phoenix Rain organized the fortress's repairs, Xiaofan concentrated on restoring the defensive magic tower's magic arrays. The magic crystals and 7 luminaries crystals he had spent to repair the towers only repaired the core crystals. It was barely enough to activate the towers. To restore the defensive magic towers to full power, players needed to repair the magic arrays and magic circuits within the towers. However, this wasn't an easy task. It required an advanced magician at the very least, and the work was intensively time-consuming. Fortunately, Xiaofan was almost a master magician, so he could repair the arrays and circuits smoothly and swiftly. Once the 4 defensive magic towers' final magic circuit had been repaired, the tower's system interface reported that the towers were complete. System: the northern fortress's defensive magic towers have been fully repaired. It will cost 8,000 magic crystals to activate them and 6,000 magic crystals per day to maintain them. Do you wish to activate the defensive magic towers? Running at 100% efficiency is certainly expensive. Xiaofan was a little astonished when he read the system notification. The tower's operation cost was much higher than an ordinary magic tower. Not even ordinary first-rate guilds could afford to keep the northern fortress's defensive magic towers running constantly. However, Xiaofan did not hesitate, activating the towers immediately. After Xiaofan had sacrificed the required magic crystals, a twofold magic array appeared above the northern fortress, enveloping it. The twofold magic array then created a double-layered magic barrier around the fortress, which was much stronger than the barrier Xiaofan and Phoenix Rain's army had broken through. At the same time, all of the mana within a 10,000-yard radius of the northern fortress began to gather within the fortress's walls. The fortress's mana density skyrocketed, especially in the fortress's core. The mana there was so dense that it transformed into a white mist. The players within the mist felt an indescribably pleasant sensation course through them, and a second experience bar appeared below their main bar, show that they had accumulated the double EXP buff. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion members were dumbfounded. Aqua, how are the fortress's repairs coming along? Xiaofan asked after contacting Aqua Rose. We're 60% done. According to your instructions, we've prioritized hotels and accommodations, so they're ready now, Aqua Rose reported. Good. In that case, we can open the fortress to the public, Xiaofan said, smiling. He then called up the northern fortress's system interface and did just that. Chapter 2297, Heading to the Northern Fortress. After Xiaofan opened the Northern Fortress to the public, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilions and Zero Wings members quickly disseminated news of this throughout the Gravity Mountain Range and Dragonheart City. Zero Wing opened the Northern Fortress so quickly. Zero Wing is probably trying to snag some advantages. However, now that War Blood has made that kind of threat, who would dare visit the Northern Fortress? The various adventurer teams in the Gravity Mountain Range shook their heads and sighed at this piece of news. The small fortress 13 thrones captured was hardly enough to accommodate the players operating in the Gravity Mountain Range. Hence, the capture of the Northern Fortress was naturally good news. However, War Blood had already stated that whoever dared visit the Northern Fortress would become its enemy. The various adventurer teams with weak foundations did not dare provoke the War Blood adventurer team at all. Meanwhile, over at the Rock Nest Fortress, War Blood and 9 Dragons Emperor had also received news of the Northern Fortress's opening. Commander Blood, it seems Zero Wing is really anxious. Instead of properly making use of the fortress's 3-day protection period, it actually opened the fortress so quickly. With this, before we can even take action, the Northern Fortress will most likely fall to the monster tides first. This situation elated 9 Dragons Emperor. The various superpowers operating on Dragonheart Island all knew that defending a fortress in the Gravity Mountain Range, especially against the first monster tide a fortress would face, was much more difficult than capturing one. Hence, the wisest decision was to utilize every second of the 3-day protection period after a fortress's conquest to enhance the fortress's defenses as much as possible. Now, however, just one day after seizing the Northern Fortress, Zero Wing had taken the initiative to lift the protection mechanism and open the Northern Fortress to the public. Since the Rock Nest Fortress had yet to open, such an action would indeed attract some players to the northern fortress. However, the monster tide at the northern fortress would not weaken just because the guild didn't take full advantage of the protection mechanism. Zero Wing is indeed quick. Unfortunately for it, I won't leave it with even the slightest shred of hope, Blood Oath said coldly. Inc. Spread the news that we'll be opening Rock Nest Fortress tomorrow. We'll thoroughly eliminate the various adventurer teams, and guilds' thoughts of moving to Lee Northern Fortress. Upon hearing Blood Oath's words, Nine Dragons' Emperor was surprised. He never thought that Blood Oath would be so vicious as to give Zero Wing no opportunities whatsoever. In reality, although opening the Northern Fortress so soon was very risky, Zero Wing's decision was still a considerably effective move. After all, the number of players grinding in the Gravity Mountain range increased with each passing day. 13 Thrones small fortress couldn't satisfy the needs of all of these players by itself. Hence, despite Warblood's influence and deterrence, some adventurer teams and guilds would still rest in the Northern Fortress. After all, traveling between the Gravity Mountain range and Dragonheart City required a lot of time which they could spend earning more income. However, if the various adventurer teams and guilds only had to wait one more day for Rock Nest Fortress's opening, then they would generally show Warblood some respect and avoid visiting the Northern Fortress, thereby rendering Zero Wing's actions meaningless. Meanwhile, shortly after Warblood issued its new announcement, Ku Rong, who was in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence in Dragonheart City, received news about it. Moon, what do you think of this situation? Ku Rong asked as he looked at the majestic woman seated at a corner of his office. Originally, I had a considerably high opinion of Zero Wing, Cloudy Moon said unhurriedly. Unfortunately, Warblood and Starlink's influence is far too great. Their foundations are also extraordinary. Even if Black Flame possesses frightening combat power, he alone can't change the overall situation. Moreover, I heard that 13 Thrones is already planning on working with Starlink again to capture a medium fortress. Once that happens, Zero Wing would lose all its advantages. In Cloudy Moon's opinion, Phoenix Rain's decision was simply too immature. Had Phoenix Rain accepted Starlink's offer for partnership before, then her promotion to Great Pavilion Master would have been practically guaranteed. Unfortunately, Phoenix Rain ended up giving away that opportunity to Nine Dragons' Emperor. Alright, I understand. Go make the necessary preparations, Ku Rong sighed. Now that the situation was clear for all to see, if the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion wished to form a good relationship with Starlink, then Phoenix Rain, who was now considered Starlink's enemy, was unsuitable for the position of Great Pavilion Master. While the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was secretly making its preparations, the various powers of Dragonheart City were in an uproar over Warblood's decisiveness. This situation allowed the general population in Dragonheart City to realize once more how frightening superpowers were. Even though Zero Wing was a large guild that successfully captured the Northern Fortress, it was still no more than an ant before a superpower. Meanwhile, on a gravel hill in the Gravity Mountain range, 100 level 85 plus experts geared in level 85 secret silver equipment were frantically besieging a level 89 Grand Lord. The Grand Lord ranked 6-armed demonic bear possessed extremely high defense and destructive power. It could easily send several MTs flying with a single attack. However, facing the level 90 Tigerkin Berserker at the helm of the team, the demonic bear was actually getting pushed back one step after another, no match for the Berserker in terms of strength. After battling 20 more minutes, the 6-armed demonic bear finally fell at the feet of this 100-man team. Our boss is too amazing. He actually managed to contend against the 6-armed demonic bear. With this kind of strength, he can definitely rank within the top 50 berserkers on Dragonheart Island, a level 87 shield warrior said in admiration. I know, right? Previously, Heaven's Blade's commander even invited our boss to become a vice commander at Heaven's Blade, a level 87 ranger said, the female half-elf's eyes glowing as she looked at the level 90 berserker. Heaven's Blade was one of Dragonheart Island's top 10 adventurer teams. Heaven's Blade's commander, Zwei, was even the idol of countless female players. An invitation from Zwei to become one of Heaven's Blade's vice-commanders was considered a great honor on Dragonheart Island. "Stop spouting nonsense about me," Swimming Dragon said, rolling his eyes at his teammates. "We don't have much stamina left. Once everyone's recovered, we'll make our way to the northern fortress to rest." "Boss, Warblood has already set the northern fortress off limits. Heaven's Blade also warned us that we'll definitely get targeted by Warblood if we patronize the northern fortress. If that happens, it'll be very difficult for us to squeeze into the top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade." Upon hearing Swimming Dragon's words, the other players on the team hurriedly tried to dissuade him. The Dragon Riders adventurer team was improving so rapidly that they now had a chance at becoming one of the top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade. This was something that they never imagined was possible. After all, Heaven's Blade was the 5th-rank adventurer team on Dragonheart Island. Plenty of adventurer teams subordinated themselves to Heaven's Blade, but only 8 adventurer teams would receive priority treatment. So long as Dragon Riders became one of these top 8 adventurer teams, its position on Dragonheart Island would skyrocket. At that time, even first-rate guilds would not dare to provoke it. "Enough. I know what I'm doing. Tidy up immediately. We're heading to the northern fortress right now," Swimming Dragon berated, completely ignoring everyone's opinion. He had his current success only because of Xiaofan. While training inside the Tower of Four Gods, he had not only entered the flowing water realm but also mastered an advanced combat technique and improved his completion rate for Tier 2 skills by a significant margin. After his challenge ended, he even received an epic-ranked replica of the legendary weapon Hurricane's Injury. This replica was top-tier even among epic weapons. Moreover, the greatsword also had high compatibility with him. As a result, his combat power underwent a qualitative improvement after he equipped the weapon. Now that Zero Wing was in trouble, how could he just stand by and do nothing? Since Warblood wished to seal the pathway leading toward the northern region and prevent players from entering or exiting the area, then Swimming Dragon could just stick to grinding in the northern region. In any case, with the northern fortress around, he would not have to worry about having nowhere to rest. Warblood wouldn't be able to do anything against him. The other members of Dragon Riders had no choice but to listen to their commander's words and head off toward the northern fortress. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After traveling by mount for several hours and carefully avoiding Warblood's members, Swimming Dragon and the others finally arrived at the northern fortress. However, the moment everyone walked through the fortress's gates, they were stunned. What's going on? Why is the mana density here so high? No, it's not just the mana here. I can feel my body becoming significantly lighter as well. It's as if the suppression outside is gone. Chapter 2298, Heavenly Fortress. After momentarily falling into a daze, Dragon Riders members promptly revealed ecstatic expressions on their faces. It's true. That pressure really has disappeared. Boss, if we can rest here long-term, we can keep grinding in the Gravity Mountain range without returning to Dragonheart City. If that's the case, we won't need more than half a month to surpass those top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade. Previously, they had not expected much of the Northern Fortress. After all, they had visited 13 Thrones Fortress before, so they knew what purpose the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses served. These fortresses were merely temporary rest areas. Aside from allowing players to recover stamina and concentration, they only provided materials replenishment and weapons and equipment repair. However, the Northern Fortress completely overthrew their understanding of the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses. Setting aside accumulating the double EXP buff inside the Northern Fortress, just the fact that the fortress could remove the ever-present pressure they felt while grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range was already plenty amazing. Since the Northern Fortress had this kind of ability, they would not need to head back to Dragonheart City to relieve themselves of this pressure. Although the pressure the Gravity Mountain Range exerted on them had only a minuscule effect, long-term exposure would still build up mental fatigue, which would rise especially quickly when they were fighting against powerful monsters. Hence, even with the opportunity to rest in 13 Thrones Fortress, they would still return to Dragonheart City once every 4 or 5 days to relax and refresh their minds. At this point, it was already their 3rd day in the Gravity Mountain Range, so the mental fatigue they had accumulated was quite significant. However, the moment they entered the Northern Fortress, said mental fatigue had disappeared completely. Normally, this pleasant sensation was something they would feel only after returning to Dragonheart City. If they could rid themselves of the Gravity Mountain Range's pressure just by entering the Northern Fortress, then they could forego returning to Dragonheart City and remain in the Gravity Mountain Range. With this, they could save plenty on the travel time between the World Tower and Dragonheart City, thereby increasing their leveling speed and resource acquisition rate. In this situation, Swimming Dragon could not help being overjoyed. The Northern Fortress's benefits might not seem like much, but with persistence, a drop of water could wear out even a stone. With the help of the Northern Fortress's ability, the Dragon Riders Adventurer team could slowly pull ahead of Dragonheart City's adventurer teams. Surpassing the top 8 adventurer teams subordinate to Heaven's Blade would also be a piece of cake. During the time Dragon Riders members were strolling about, enjoying the Northern Fortress's pressure-free environment, a gasp suddenly appeared in the team chat. "Boss, come over here, quickly. I discovered something good," a level 87 Tigerkin Shield Warrior yelled excitedly. "What is it? What's so important that you need to make such a huge fuss?" Swimming Dragon asked, exasperated. Dragon Riders was a well-known adventurer team on Dragonheart Island. Having one of its members act like a country bumpkin in front of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilions and Zero Wings members after entering the Northern Fortress was a huge embarrassment to the adventurer team. "Boss, it's the teleportation scroll for this fortress. Return scrolls for the Northern Fortress are available at the defensive magic towers," the Tigerkin Shield Warrior replied. "What? Return scrolls?" Swimming Dragon's breathing momentarily grew heavier. Return scrolls for locations in the outside world were unusable inside the World Tower. Meanwhile, the Gravity Mountain Range was an extremely dangerous place, and players could enter a death zone unawares at any time. Players might be able to escape momentarily using instantaneous transfer scrolls, but without the help of a return scroll, they would still encounter countless perils on their way back to safety. If players could utilize return scrolls inside the Gravity Mountain Range, they would no longer have to be afraid of exploring unknown and dangerous regions. Moreover, with return scrolls, players would no longer have to conserve their stamina and concentration to walk back to the nearest rest area, increasing their range of operations drastically. "Buy them. Buy them all, quickly. It doesn't matter even if they cost 1 ancient gold each." Swimming Dragon ordered, his eyes glowing with excitement. Ancient gold might be difficult to earn, but compared to their lives, let alone 1 ancient gold, even 10 ancient gold would not be comparable. After all, even a single death at their levels would deprive them of plenty of opportunities. "Boss, relax. These return scrolls are sold by NPCs. You can have as many as you want. Moreover, each return scroll costs only 10 ancient silver. However, these return scrolls are bound to the buyer and cannot be transferred to other players," the Tigerkin Shield Warrior said, grinning. "What? Only 10 ancient silver?" For a moment, Swimming Dragon thought he had misheard. Ordinary players might not be able to bear the price of 10 ancient silver, but this was easily affordable for experts like themselves. After all, just entering the Gravity Mountain Range cost 5 ancient silver, while entering a fortress was 1 ancient silver and staying in a hotel, 2 to 3 ancient silver. Following which, Swimming Dragon had everyone in his team immediately go and purchase some return scrolls at the defensive magic towers. In fact, aside from some money for accommodation and repair fees, he told his teammates to spend all their ancient silver to purchase the Northern Fortress's return scrolls, afraid that the return scrolls would become unavailable or increase in price in the future. However, what Swimming Dragon did not know was that the system handled the price for the Northern Fortress's return scrolls, which could be considered one of the special abilities of the defensive magic towers. This ability was something similar to the additional skills found on weapons and equipment. Xiaofan had no say in the settings and could only collect a portion of the profits. Meanwhile, even after having his teammates spend all their spare ancient silver on return scrolls, Swimming Dragon was still not satisfied. After all, he knew that so long as they exploited this opportunity to the fullest, the Dragon Riders Adventurer team could see a qualitative leap in development. Notify everyone in the Adventurer team and have them come to the Northern Fortress. From now onwards, the Northern Fortress will be Dragon Riders' main headquarters. Swimming Dragon said. After saying so, he immediately visited 4 of the Northern Fortress's basic hotels and rented all 4 long-term for 60 ancient gold per day. He intended to have these 4 hotels serve as Dragon Riders' temporary headquarters and lodging for the Adventurer team's members. That way, members would not have to worry about accommodations and end up sleeping on the streets. Shortly after Swimming Dragon gave his command, Dragon Riders members promptly sprang into action. All 2,000 plus members of the Adventurer team suddenly headed to the World Tower. The large-scale movement piqued the curiosity of many of the Adventurer teams that had close relations with Dragon Riders. Some players that were friends with Dragon Riders members also asked their friends about this situation. What are you guys trying to do? Is Dragon Riders conducting some kind of large-scale operation? It's not a large-scale operation. Our Adventurer team is just moving our main headquarters to the Northern Fortress. Are you guys insane? Didn't you hear the threat Warblood made? Warblood might be powerful, but we can simply stick to the northern region. At worst, we'll just avoid grinding in the Gravity Mountain Range's other areas. Here, let me tell you a secret. Zero Wing's Northern Fortress is freaking amazing. Not only can you accumulate the double EXP buff there, but my team leader says that you can even rid yourself of the Gravity Mountain Range's ever-present pressure by entering the Northern Fortress. What's even more amazing is that there are return scrolls on sale at the Northern Fortress. With those, even ordinary experts like us can grind freely and efficiently in the Gravity Mountain Range. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You're kidding me, right? I've been to 13 Thrones Fortress before. It's fine if you don't believe me, but once my level surpasses yours, don't say that I never told you about this. After saying so, the members of Dragon Riders hurried toward the Northern Fortress. They all wished to start competing for the Gravity Mountain Range's leveling resources as soon as possible. While the Dragon Riders Adventurer team was rushing to the Northern Fortress, information about the Northern Fortress started spreading among some of Dragonheart City's adventurer teams. Shortly after, news of it also reached Dragonheart City's major powers. Chapter 2299, Popular Fortress. Dragonheart City was originally already bubbling over the conflict between Zero Wing and Warblood. Hence, the city's various powers were keeping an eye out for news about the Northern Fortress. The World Tower could be said to be Dragonheart City's greatest resource. The various powers had all obtained a large number of leveling and material resources from it. Meanwhile, the Gravity Mountain Range's fortresses played a crucial role in further enhancing their resource acquisition rate. With rumors regarding the Northern Fortress's devastating abilities proliferating, Dragonheart City's various powers immediately launched an investigation to ascertain the truth. Return scrolls? Investigate. I want this information verified as soon as possible. Previously, the various powers had nothing much to say about Warblood's threat, as Warblood had also captured a fortress in the northern region and was going to open it just one day after the Northern Fortress opened. A one-day difference wouldn't affect their development by much. Moreover, the northern fortress's location was remote, so it wasn't particularly attractive to the various powers. At best, it could only serve as a rest area. However, things were different now. The northern fortress's return scroll would be a game-changer in the Gravity Mountain range. The difference between having a return scroll and not having one while grinding in the Gravity Mountain range was massive. Moreover, the effects would snowball as time passed. The reason the various powers had set up a base of operations in Dragonheart City was to gain better development resources. If their own profits were not affected, the various powers would show Warblood some respect and avoid provoking it as much as possible. However, it was a whole other story if conceding to Warblood's demands affected their development by a significant margin. Dragonheart City's various powers sent scouts to check out the northern fortress, which crowded the hall of the World Tower's first underground floor. The moment the various powers' scouts entered the northern fortress, they were shocked by the fortress's environment. The high mana density and lack of mental pressure here made the northern fortress no different from Dragonheart City. It was entirely possible for players to use the northern fortress as a temporary base. With the northern fortress, they would no longer have to shuttle between the World Tower and Dragonheart City. Most importantly, the northern fortress possessed return scrolls. The price of 10 ancient silver nearly had the visiting players wondering whether they were hallucinating. After the various powers' scouts reported back about the situation inside the northern fortress, a huge commotion erupted in Dragonheart City. The Gravity Mountain Range's resources were incomparably abundant. Until now, the various powers had yet to explore even 2/3 of the entire map. This was especially true for the ruins of the ancient civilization. These ruins contained a plethora of precious treasures. Only, due to the Gravity Mountain Range's environment, exploring these ruins was still incredibly difficult, even with the help of a small fortress. Meanwhile, although the northern fortress was in a remote area, it perfectly solved the hindrance to staying in the Gravity Mountain Range long-term. This meant that guild members could start exploring the various ancient ruins with much greater efficiency than before and secure even more resources for themselves. Their exploration progress might even surpass that of 13 Thrones, which possessed a small fortress. Notify everyone immediately. We're shifting our guild's base of operations on Dragonheart Island to the northern fortress. But what about Warblood? Screw them. This is an opportunity for our guild. We'll kill anybody that stands in our way. Less than an hour after the various powers based in Dragonheart City verified the rumors regarding the northern fortress, many started sending a large number of experts there lest other powers get ahead of them. After all, the northern fortress was only a medium fortress. Unlike a city, a medium fortress could accommodate only a very limited number of players. The number of hotels in a fortress was especially limited. Not resting in a hotel would severely impact players' recovery speed. Moreover, according to the powers' investigations, the northern fortress's hotels could even hasten the double EXP buff's accumulation rate. The difference between having a hotel to rest in and not having one would drastically affect their leveling speed. Meanwhile, over at the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress, the sudden influx of players made the fortress bustle. Big Sis Rain, according to our latest statistics, over 150,000 players have visited the northern fortress thus far, and estimates state that we should hit the 400,000 mark by the end of today, Blue Phoenix reported excitedly as she approached Phoenix Rain. Back when 13 Thrones had successfully captured a fortress, despite the huge commotion in Dragonheart City, the fortress had managed to attract only around 200,000 visitors on its first day. Meanwhile, the fortress had a player population of only 700,000, which was also the maximum capacity of a small fortress. In comparison, the northern fortress was expected to attract over 400,000 visitors on the opening day alone. It would most likely take only 2 or 3 days to exceed the 700,000 threshold. Reaching the maximum capacity of 1,500,000 players was only a matter of time. It should be known that even with just a 700,000 player population, 13 Thrones small fortress generated tons of wealth and resources every day. Although Blue Phoenix did not know how much the small fortress was earning exactly, according to the investigations of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion spies, the fortress's daily income was at least 5,000 ancient gold and 600,000 ancient silver. Once the northern fortress's player population reached maximum capacity, one could easily imagine how much income it would generate. Moreover, the northern fortress had many more sources of revenue than 13 Thrones small fortress. Even though Phoenix Rain held only 20% of the northern fortress's shares, the income she would receive could rival half of a small fortress's total income, at the very least. Half. Even Starlink did not receive half of the income from 13 Thrones small fortress. At that time, who would dare question Phoenix Rain's position in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion? I'm afraid that even Warblood and Starlink did not expect such an outcome. When Phoenix Rain looked at the statistics report in her hand, she could not help but sigh ruefully. Previously, even after successfully capturing the northern fortress, she had still felt that Xiaofan had gone overboard with his actions in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. Now, however, it would seem that the one to regret their actions would not be Zero Wing, but Warblood instead. The northern fortress's future was already clear for all to see. Once a sufficient number of players gathered and the northern fortress was in full operation, it would be impossible for Warblood to exhaust and destroy Zero Wing in the Sea of Death. After all, the disparity in the incomes of the two sides would be simply too massive. Aside from Phoenix Rain, Dragonheart City's various superpowers were entertaining such thoughts as well. Although Warblood had captured the Rock Nest Fortress, the difference between that and the northern fortress was far too massive. With this, Warblood had backed itself into a corner. After all, Warblood had previously declared that it would ban all those who entered the northern fortress from the Rock Nest Fortress. Now, the players that were originally planning on resting at the Rock Nest Fortress would not dare approach the fortress at all, a situation that would definitely reduce the Rock Nest Fortress's income. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. While the various powers were paying attention to the northern fortress, Xiaofan was hustling in the northern fortress. Not only did he have to reorganize the northern fortress's construction plans, due to the explosive increase in player population, but he also had to deal with the partnership offers and shop purchase requests from the various powers. Guild leader, the Fong family's people have visited our main headquarters and stated that they wish to meet you, Gentle Snow, who was currently organizing the information on the northern fortress's shops, said, a grim expression on her face. Previously, due to her personal matters, Xiaofan had stepped forward to provoke the Fong family, the number one family in Fonglin City, which possessed extraordinary influence in the city. The fact that the Fong family was paying Zero Wing a visit now definitely wasn't good news for the guild. The Fong family? Xiaofan nodded. Let's go meet them, then. Chapter 2300, Clash with the Fong family. Zero Wing's main headquarters, top floor reception room. 4 people waited in the reception room, and the atmosphere was unusually depressing. Xiao Yu, who acted as the receptionist, wore a particularly ugly expression. Xiao Yu's reaction to the middle-aged man was the cause of the atmosphere in the room. The older gentleman wore gray, martial artist robes and loomed like a mountain. His aura was also quite oppressive. However, his physical presence wasn't the only reason for Xiao Yu's reaction. His identity was the true reason. The middle-aged man was the current head of the Fong family and the chairman of the Qilin Corporation, Fong Zhenyuan. The Qilin Corporation might not be on the same level as the Five States Corporation, but it was one of the first-rate corporations in the country. It was also why the Fong family stood at the top among Fonglin City's powerful families. If Fong Zhenyuan wished it, he could destroy the Big Dipper group with a word. Why wouldn't Xiao Yu be afraid with such an important individual before him? Fong Zhenyuan was a true mogul in the business world, nothing like the youngsters that had inherited their families' businesses. A young man and woman accompanied Fang Zhenyuan in the room. The young man was none other than Fang Mingyu, the Fang family's strongest expert of the younger generation. On the other hand, Xiaoyu didn't recognize the young woman with long, wavy hair and wearing a bright red dress. However, he knew she must be of high status, considering that she visited Zero Wing's headquarters alongside Fang Zhenyuan. As Xiaoyu wondered why a VIP like Fang Zhenyuan would visit Zero Wing's headquarters, the reception room's doors opened, and Shifeng, Bai Qingxue, and Lei Bao entered. Fang Mingyu's indifferent expression vanished the moment he saw Shifeng. Even Xiaoyu could see the fear in the large man's eyes. However, Fang Mingyu's gaze also contained a trace of killing intent. Xiaoyu found the man's reaction reasonable after giving the matter some thought. Fang Mingyu was the Fang family's prided genius, yet Shifeng had subdued him with a single move in the Redstone restaurant. To make matters worse, Fenglin City's upper society frequently visited the Redstone restaurant, and they wouldn't miss the news of Fang Mingyu's miserable defeat. I had my doubts about Mingyu's claim, but looking at you now, it seems he had been correct. You are both courageous and strong. I'm afraid none among the younger generation is a match for you, Fang Zhenyuan said, a trace of shock flashing in his eyes as he examined Shifeng. Gentle Snow, who had already been worried about this visit, began to panic when she saw Fang Zhenyuan. She had never expected him to visit Zero Wing personally. Mr. Fang's praise is too generous. May I know what business the Fang family has with me today? Shifeng asked, getting straight to the point. The Fang family's visit didn't particularly surprise Shifeng. Since they had made a personal appearance, they must have important business to discuss, but Shifeng had no desire to play their word games. He still had a lot he needed to do. Since you've asked, I'll just put it bluntly. You'd caused quite a commotion in the Redstone restaurant. After all is said and done, the Fang family is one of the most reputable families in Fenglin City. If we don't take act, how do you think the other families will view ours? Fang Zhenyuan peacefully explained. However, I've heard that Zero Wing's development in God's domain is quite impressive, and the virtual combat platform you've recently set up has been performing considerably well. The Fang family has interests in these aspects, so we plan to invest in Zero Wing. In return, the Fang family only wants 51% of Zero Wing's shares. Not only will Zero Wing receive a massive capital deposit from the Qilin Corporation to boost its development, but you'll also have access to the various dojos and training centers in Fenglin City for recruiting and nurturing talented players. What are your thoughts? After Fang Zhenyuan's statement, the room fell silent. Xiaoyu stared at the man in astonishment. He had never thought that this colossal existence would be interested in Zero Wing enough to offer full investment. Although many guilds in God's domain were supported by major corporations, that support was limited. No corporation would invest so much in a single guild. If Zero Wing had the Qilin Corporation's full support, both Zero Wing and the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's development speed would undergo a qualitative transformation. However, Fang Zhenyuan's demand for 51% of the organization's shares would set him up as Zero Wing's owner. Gentle Snow paled instantly. She hadn't expected the Fang family's appetite to be this large. This is the friendliest threat I've ever heard, Shifeng said, chuckling. To put it simply, Fang Zhenyuan wanted to become Zero Wing's majority shareholder in exchange for letting the previous insult slide. Do you intend to make an enemy of the Fang family? Fang Zhenyuan asked, frowning. Coldly, he continued, or do you think that you can lead Zero Wing and Heaven's Rumble against the Fang family with your martial prowess alone? As Fang Zhenyuan's tone chilled, the intensity of his aura spiked. The room grew heated as if a volcano had begun to erupt. A neutralizing Grandmaster! Lei Bao exclaimed from behind Shifeng, stunned by the revelation. Although Lei Bao had felt substantial pressure from Fang Zhenyuan and knew this man was no ordinary person, he hadn't expected the head of the Fang family to be a neutralizing Grandmaster. It was impressive enough for one family to nurture a single neutralizing grandmaster. A family could prosper for an entire century with just one such individual. The Fang family only enjoyed its current status today due to old man Fang, Fang Zhenyuan's father. And yet, Fang Zhenyuan exposed the fact that he was also a neutralizing grandmaster, which meant the Fang family had two such individuals. When Xiao Yu heard Lei Bao's statement, he was just as stunned. With two neutralizing grandmasters, it had enough influence to force the various families, dojos, and training centers in Fenglin City to obey its every command, regardless of the rest of the Fang family's martial prowess. Fang Mingyu, who reclined on a sofa, sneered at Xiaofan. Everyone had assumed the Fang family's rise was due to his grandfather. They also believed that once his grandfather reached his 101st birthday, the family would crumble. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, the public didn't realize that the Fang family's foundations had grown since his grandfather had led the family. If they hadn't, his grandfather would never have passed control of the family to his father, Fang Zhenyuan. Fang Mingyu acknowledged that he was no match for Xiaofan, but the tricks Xiaofan had played against him wouldn't work with his father. When he faced his father, Fang Mingyu didn't even have the heart to resist. He had no hope of contending with his father's inhuman fitness in a direct confrontation. "How can I know if I don't try?" Xiaofan nonchalantly replied. "Good. Let me see if you're as strong as you claim." Fang Zhenyuan's fist then shot toward Xiaofan with exceptional speed and grace. Chapter 2301, Rivaling a Grandmaster So Fast. Lei Bao's expression turned sour as he watched Fang Zhenyuan move. He hadn't expected the man to attack without hesitation. Fang Zhenyuan had none of the magnanimity of a martial arts grandmaster. Fang Zhenyuan's punch was so fast that the human body had practically no time to react. "Come!" However, Xiaofan had reacted as Fang Zhenyuan's fist had begun to move. Neutralizing grandmasters' mental processing speed was far faster than an ordinary human's. Their sensitivity to danger was easily 10 times sharper than an ordinary person's, as well. They could sense an incoming attack before the enemy even moved, which was why neutralizing grandmasters were so frightening. Since this was his first time fighting a neutralizing grandmaster in the real world, Xiaofan decided to greet the hit with a punch of his own, rather than dodge. Like Fang Zhenyuan's punch, Xiaofan lacked any flowery movements. It was standard, textbook punch. Suicidal bastard. Fang Mingyu could not help but grin as he watched. Fang Mingyu had recognized that Xiaofan was weaker than he was during their clash in the Redstone restaurant, not to mention his father. His father might be old, but thanks to modem technology like the life potion, he maintained his peak condition even at his age. In fact, Fang Zhenyuan's body wouldn't even begin to deteriorate for another 2 decades. The fact that Xiaofan chose to face the hit head-on was suicidal. Boom! As the two fists collided, the air between them compressed and shattered, the shockwave cracking the marble ground beneath them. The room shook slightly, and even Bai Qingxue stumbled backward. After the clash, Xiaofan and Fang Zhenyuan took a step back, the ground under their feet slightly sunken. How is this possible? Fang Mingyu stared at Xiaofan with wide, shocked eyes when he saw the younger man completely unharmed from the exchange. 10 days ago, Xiaofan had been weaker than he was, yet now, Xiaofan had taken his father's punch without suffering any damage. He stopped it? The outcome greatly shocked Lei Bao, as well. He knew that Xiaofan was a neutralizing grandmaster, but Fang Zhenyuan had walked this path for decades now. Regardless of when he had become a neutralizing grandmaster, his fitness was inhuman. Xiaofan should have no hope of matching the older man in this regard. Moreover, Fang Zhenyuan's punch had been out of this world. Lei Bao was sure that if he had tried to take that hit head-on, he would have either died or been severely injured. In truth, even Xiaofan was relatively surprised. He hadn't considered that he'd improve so massively after his training in the Tower of Four Gods. Not only had his fitness rapidly improved, but he had also substantially increased his control. He had successfully implemented some of the sword's transmigration's principles in his punch, diverting a portion of Fang Zhenyuan's strength downward. This was why he had been able to face that hit without injury. If this fight had taken place after Xiaofan had just broken through to the Grandmaster realm, he would have definitely taken damage from Fang Zhenyuan's punch. Is this the strength of neutralizing Grandmasters? Bai Qingxue thought as she gazed down at the shattered floor and felt the stifling auras radiating off of Xiaofan and Fang Zhenyuan. This seemed more like a fight between mechanical beasts, rather than a fight between humans. It was no wonder why Fenglin City's various families were so afraid of the Fang family. Meanwhile, Xiaofan and Fang Zhenyuan didn't continue to fight after exchanging hits. Instead, they took a moment to observe each other in silence. Excellent. To reach such a standard at such an age, it's no wonder why you're so confident, Fang Zhenyuan said as he calmly watched Xiaofan. Smiling, he continued, however, how long do you think you can protect Zero Wing by yourself? You know that more than one organization is targeting Zero Wing. Partnering with the Fang family is your best option. Zero Wing can only contend with these organizations with the Fang family's resources and strength. If you refuse, only death will await you. You don't need to concern yourself with such matters, Mr. Fang, Xiaofan said. Zero Wing will take care of its own. Zero Wing had already grown powerful enough that not even first-rate guilds were a match for it, yet as luck would have it, Zero Wing didn't have a powerful background. It was only natural that other organizations would have set their sights on the guild. It was why Xiaofan was trying to accelerate the Heaven's Rumble Training Center's development. However, he hadn't thought that a power like the Fang family would try to annex Zero Wing so soon. Is that so? Fang Zhenyuan laughed. I hope you can keep this kind of confidence when the time comes. Fang Zhenyuan then turned and left the reception room, showing no intention of trying to persuade Xiaofan further. Fang Mingyu and the girl in the red dress stood from their seats, following after the older man. After leaving Zero Wing's main headquarters and climbing into his luxury car, Fang Zhenyuan turned to the young woman, who had remained silent, with a serious expression. Xiaofan, I'll contact Fenglin City's dojos and training centers later. I'll leave Heaven's Rumble's virtual combat platform to you, Fang Zhenyuan said coldly. With your position in mythology, you should have no problem suppressing a guild like Zero Wing, correct? If a guild wished to develop in God's domain, it needed sufficient manpower. Heaven's Rumble had attracted quite a few talented fighters with the virtual platform it had set up, and as long as they dealt with the platform, Zero Wing's development in the game would stagnate. Once they had suppressed Zero Wing from every angle, it would only be a matter of time before Xiaofan submitted to the Fang family. Of course. Mythology is one of the top 5 super guilds of God's domain. However, mythology is based on the Western continent, and there's no connection between the East and West continents yet. It's not possible to connect to Easter players' data via the virtual combat platform yet. I'll need some time before I can lead a team to the Eastern continent, the red-dressed girl named Fang Xiaofan said, smiling. Once we cross over, we'll trample over Zero Wing's experts. Guilds on the 2 continents have different areas of focus, and the difference between combat standards is massive. Alright. I'll leave the situation to you. Mingyu will help you where he can, Fang Zhenyuan said, nodding. After Fang Zhenyuan's group had left, an uproar rose in Zero Wing's headquarters. Zero Wing's members knew about the conflict between the guild and the Fang family. Xiaofan had caused quite the scene in the Redstone restaurant, after all, and as a result, the situation with the Fang family weighed on everyone's minds. Since the Fang family had left without achieving anything, Zero Wing's players breathed a sigh of relief. Hall Master, now that the Fong family has revealed that it has two neutralizing grandmasters, Fonglin City's dojos and training centers will side with the family. Some of the dojos and training centers we've signed partnership agreements with will likely pull out of the deals. I'm afraid that it won't be possible to recruit a large number of talented combatants quickly, Xiaoyu said. Moreover, the Fong family will most likely work with other dojos and training centers to compete with our pricing. If they don't want to work with us, so be it. Our priority is to set up more virtual combat platforms, so I want you to try to set up some small-scale training centers around the city, Xiaofan replied. He, too, understood the influence the Fong family would command with two neutralizing grandmasters. Furthermore, the Fong family had the Qilin Corporation's support. Zero Wing was utterly outmatched when it came to strength and financial resources. However, the virtual combat platform would become the mainstream platform for combat in the future. As long as the Heaven's Rumble Training Center developed its virtual combat platforms, it had some chance of competing with the Fong family. Developing the platforms won't be a problem, but with our current finances, setting up the training centers will be, Xiaoyu said helplessly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Although Zero Wing had recently earned quite a few credits through Stone Forest Town, setting up a large enough virtual combat platform would cost a lot of money. The setup for a platform in the training center was already a huge burden on Zero Wing's finances. Trying to set up more was simply unrealistic. Relax. Zero Wing is quite rich right now, Xiaofan said, smiling. I'll start searching for suitable locations then, Xiaoyu said, his eyes glowing with excitement upon hearing Xiaofang's response. If they had sufficient capital, Heaven's Rumble wouldn't have to worry about its development even without Fonglin City's various dojos and training centers. After discussing the training center's future with Xiaoyu, Xiaofan returned to God's domain. Other guilds might struggle to earn money in God's domain at this stage of the game, but that wasn't an issue for Zero Wing, especially after capturing the northern fortress. After all, the Gravity Mountain Range was becoming a hub for various wealthy powers. Chapter 2302, Renting Shops. Gravity Mountain Range, Northern Fortress. As soon as Xiaofan came online, he was greeted by the sight of a very busy street. As he walked through the city streets, he saw large groups of guild players running toward the fortress's hotels, reserving all of the rooms and turning them into temporary residences for their guilds. At this point, the northern fortress was just as prosperous as an ordinary city. Xiaofan could already tell that the northern fortress would become the center of attention in the Gravity Mountain Range. Meanwhile, independent players crowded outside of Zero Wing's residence, eager to apply to join the guild. They all wanted to take advantage of the benefits the guild's residents offered, and because of this, Blackie and the others were swamped with work. Guild leader, you're back. When Aqua Rose, who was busy organizing documents in the guild leader's office, noticed Xiaofan enter the room, she worriedly asked, how did the matter with the Fong family go? Although she wasn't in Fonglin City, she was aware of the Fong family's position there. Zero Wing had just established itself in Fonglin City, and if the Fong family decided to target the guild, it would affect Zero Wing's in-game development and in the real world, especially now that the various guilds understood the importance of dojos and training centers. Many large guilds in God's domain had already partnered with dojos and training centers by this point, with some guilds even opening their own. With a dojo or training center, not only could they nurture their own talented individuals, but they could also recruit new players to bolster their strength. With the country's various training centers and dojos aligning themselves with God's domain's large guilds, Zero Wing would have a difficult time establishing itself in new cities. Hence, Zero Wing would have to rely on the Heaven's Rumble Training Center in Fonglin City to pump new blood into the guild. Everything's fine. Negotiations to purchase Zero Wing simply broke down, Xiaofan said, waving his hand. Isn't that really bad? Xiaofang's nonchalant attitude exasperated Aqua Rose. The Fong family owns the Qilin Corporation and is based in Fonglin City. The Fong family won't have any trouble targeting us. All it would need to do is contact Fonglin City's dojos and training centers and instruct them to compete with our prices. If that happens, nobody will visit the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. The Heaven's Rumble Training Center was Zero Wing's main source of new, talented players right now. If nobody visited the training center, Zero Wing wouldn't have anyone new to recruit. Moreover, the Fong family could easily afford to poach Heaven's Rumble's new members by offering them a high payout. Not only would the Fong family cut off Zero Wing's supply of new blood, but the Heaven's Rumble would become a burden on Zero Wing's finances, as well. Keeping the training center open every day cost a huge sum of money. Relax. Zero Wing isn't the same guild it used to be. The Fong family overestimates itself if it thinks it can annex us, Xiaofan said, chuckling. How is the construction for the fortress's shops coming along? They're done, but if we only rent the shops, we won't be able to earn much. As a medium fortress, the northern fortress can only accommodate so many players at once, Aqua Rose reported. Very few powers visiting the fortress have expressed any interest in the shops. Most people are asking to rent the hotels long-term, instead. The various major powers were typically quite interested in obtaining shops, but only if there was enough traffic. It would likely be quite difficult to rent the fortress's shops for a high price with the northern fortress's maximum player population. Furthermore, the number of shops in the fortress couldn't compare to those in a guild city. Based on God's domain settings, fortresses could only house a limited number of shops. A small fortress only had room for 100 shops, while a medium fortress could contain 240 shops. In comparison, a basic city could easily hold more than 1,000 shops. As long as they're done, I'm satisfied, Xiaofan said, chuckling. See to the necessary preparations and announce that the northern fortress will begin to lease its shops. The bid for each shop will start at 5 million credits per month, and will only lease 200 shops in total. First come, first served. Guild leader, you. Aqua Rose stared at Xiaofan as if he had gone mad. If they couldn't even lease Zero Wing City's shops for 5 million credit per month, how were they supposed to rent those in the northern fortress, which had less than 500,000 players right now? And Xiaofang's high price was only the starting bid. Just get it done. When the time comes, you'll understand, Xiaofan said, not bothering to explain further. Fortresses in neutral maps were far more profitable than guild cities in God's domain. Guild towns and cities couldn't be constructed in many neutral maps due to their environments, and players would have to rely on fortresses to rest. Most of God's domain's players were also independent players, and when they obtained items they didn't need, they almost always sold them in their favored rest areas. Naturally, shops were the best platform for guilds to purchase and store these items, especially the items that couldn't be stored in one's bag space. Aside from purchasing and storing materials and items, neutral fortresses' shops had a hidden benefit. They could conduct transactions with wandering merchant NPCs and purchase specialty items. Wandering merchants would visit a neutral fortress as long as it had enough security, and these NPCs frequently conducted business with individual players and shops. However, wandering merchants would only offer to sell their specialty items to shops. One such specialty item was the Advanced Wanderer's Camp. With this item, a team could set up a temporary resting area in a neutral map. Although each Advanced Wanderer's Camp could only be used 3 times, and each use had a 1-day duration, it would help a team fully recover their stamina and concentration without cutting their exploration short to return to a city or fortress. The Advanced Wanderer's Camp was an absolute treasure to exploration teams. Sometimes, if players were lucky, they would even encounter wandering merchants that were interested in selling super rare mini mobile camp. Unlike the Advanced Wanderer's Camp, the mini mobile camp was permanent. It could only accommodate 100 players at a time, but a team could use it indefinitely. It only cost a few magic crystals for each activation. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The smallest fortress wandering merchant NPCs would visit was a medium fortress, which was why the various powers had fought so desperately to capture neutral medium fortresses and larger during Xiaofan's previous life. Every neutral medium fortress was a goldmine and definitely worth waging a war to acquire. To increase their chances of developing in neutral maps, the various powers wouldn't spare any cost when renting a fortress's shops. As long as one owned a medium fortress or larger in a neutral map, they wouldn't have to worry about needing a source of income, especially if that fortress was the Northern Fortress. Currently, it was the only fortress in the Gravity Mountain range that had returned scrolls, and there were plenty of unexplored ruins in the Gravity Mountain range. Zero Wing wouldn't need to worry about no one renting the fortress's shops. After verifying Xiaofang's instructions, Aqua Rose informed the public that the Northern Fortress's shops were available for rent. Chapter 2303, Beginning of Turmoil. When news of the Northern Fortress's shops' availability went public, the various major powers that had already shifted their bases to the fortress heard about it immediately. No power would turn down the opportunity to own a fortress's shop, especially one in the Northern Fortress. At this point, the Northern Fortress was almost guaranteed to become the heart of the Gravity Mountain range. The various superpowers might capture the map's other fortresses, even one of the two remaining medium fortresses, but they weren't likely to secure a fortress as popular as the Northern Fortress. The Northern Fortress had already begun to build its advantages, while none of the others had been captured yet. However, before Dragonheart Island's various powers could focus on the Northern Fortress's shops, a system announcement reached every player in the game. System announcement: a player has triggered an epic main storyline quest and activated the new expansion pack, Invasion of Other Planes. Planar passages connecting to other worlds will begin to open in 3 hours. Every player on the God's Domain continent was stunned, not to mention the players on Dragonheart Island. After a dazed moment, they were all ecstatic. Everyone knew that otherworlds were resource treasure troves, but it wasn't easy to enter an otherworld. It was wonderful news that passages to multiple otherworlds were about to open. Guild leader, this is wonderful. With these planar passages, we won't have to worry about securing level 100 weapons and equipment anymore. Aqua Rose exclaimed. Zero Wing had a better understanding of otherworlds' available resources than other powers. Take the Ice Crystal World, for example. The Ice Crystal World possessed various unique materials and superior forging techniques. The guild had earned a fortune by exploiting these advantages. Unfortunately, when the teleportation gate to the Ice Crystal World had opened in Lake Heart City, Zero Wing's income from the otherworld had significantly decreased. This system announcement regarding the planar passages was undoubtedly good news for Zero Wing. How did this happen so soon? In contrast to Aqua Rose's reaction, Xiaofang's expression turned gloomy when he heard the system announcement. The planar passage's activation would bring an abundance of rare resources to God's Domain's main continent, but it would also bring trouble. The flood of new players to the continent would be one of the biggest problems. Many players resided in otherworlds, and once these planar passages began to open, those players could travel between the main continent and the otherworlds as well. Because of this, these otherworlds players would surge to the main continent in droves, as would many new powers. Competition on the main continent was already intense. It was easy to imagine what kind of outcome God's Domain would see if a large number of new competitors suddenly joined the fray. Even now, Xiaofan could clearly remember what had happened, and the planar passages had opened during his previous life. A massive change had rocked God's Domain's various powers, with countless powers perishing during the invasion. Not even superpowers had been spared. Although otherworlds were small, only half the size of a kingdom, their players' standards differed due to the otherworld's environments. Some otherworld players were weaker than those on the main continent, while others were stronger. The Ice Crystal World was among average among the multitude of otherworlds. In some of the stronger otherworlds, players had no issues obtaining legacies, while others made it easier for players to convert to stronger races. These players tended to have greater combat power and higher levels than those on the main continent. Zero Wing had just recently become a pseudo-superpower and had yet to reinforce its foundations. Dealing with these otherworld players and powers wouldn't help Zero Wing. As far as Xiaofan could remember, many players had already risen to Tier 3 when the planar passages had activated in the past. Since this expansion had been triggered so early in this life, the competition between players would become even more intense than he remembered. Back then, the main continent's powers had already solidified their rule in level 100+ neutral maps. Attempting to dethrone them had been an incredibly difficult task. However, players hadn't claimed the level 100+ neutral maps in this life yet, and once the otherworld players and powers arrived on the continent, the competition for these maps would grow to unprecedented levels. I need to move forward with my plans. Xiaofan gritted his teeth as he examined at Zero Wing's current statistics. After giving the matter some thought, he turned to Aqua Rose and commanded, "Aqua, notify the management in Zero Wing City and tell them to only accept credits in the shops. Also, we need to expand and recruit throughout the Dark Knight Empire." The planar passages would open all over the main continent. If Zero Wing wanted to survive the upcoming war, it needed to increase its overall strength as soon as possible. Xiaofan hadn't wanted to expand the guild too quickly, originally. More guild members meant higher costs for the guild, and if Zero Wing couldn't afford the new expenditures, the guild's development would regress. Thus, Xiaofan had decided to slow the guild's expansion, allowing Zero Wing to develop organically, unlike powers that rapidly increased their member count. Unfortunately, he couldn't afford to wait with the planar passages about to open. The gears of a new era had already begun to turn. If Zero Wing didn't have enough manpower, others would easily invade and usurp its territories, especially now that the Fong family had decided to target the Heaven's Rumble Training Center. Having received her orders, Aqua Rose quickly contacted the players that managed Zero Wing City, informing them that the guild would only accept credits as payment in its shops. Xiaofan also instructed Aqua Rose to find a method to recruit more secret silver guards with the growth potential to nearly rival fine gold rank. He currently possessed quite a bit of soul essence on him, which he could use to increase personal guards' growth potential. Although he could also use the soul essence on the guild's fine gold guards, it wasn't so easy to collect. Even after slaying all of the monsters in the northern fortress, he had only acquired 90 drops. With so little, he'd only be able to upgrade a few fine gold guards. Rather, he could upgrade a large number of secret silver guards with high growth potential to fine gold rank. Although there was only one rank between secret silver and fine gold guards, the difference between them was akin to the difference between peak experts and apex experts. If he could acquire a large group of level 100+ fine gold guards at this stage of the game, he'd have a mobile killing machine. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Xiaofan also intended to use the 2 remaining teleportation tokens to send Fire Dance, Gentle Snow, Violet Cloud, and Aqua Rose to train in the Tower of 4 Gods. Zero Wing had more than 100 refinement realm experts and barely any peak experts. It was the guild's fatal flaw. As players started to reach level 100, and the system removed their restrictions, the difference between experts' combat standards would grow, as well. It would become a lot more challenging to make up for that difference by relying on basic attributes. It was absolutely crucial that Zero Wing nurture more peak experts as quickly as possible. Once Xiaofan had handled these affairs, the sound of another system notification reached his ears. System announcement: planar passages have opened. Players can now visit their local planar passage to travel between worlds. Chapter 2304, Planar Passages activated. Starmoon Kingdom, Starmoon City. Players flowed in and out of the lively teleportation hall. Merchant players and well-known adventurer teams from other kingdoms and empires were a common sight in and around the building. Although Star Moon City wasn't as prosperous as White River City, as Star Moon Kingdom's transit hub and the closest city to the Ore Empire in the kingdom, many players frequented the city. Star Moon City was already a large city with more than 9 million player residents. It was above average among God's Domain's various capital cities. Suddenly, a group of players with dark marks on their foreheads arrived in the teleportation hall. When the other players in the hall noticed them, they fell silent. Every one of these 100-plus players had reached level 92 or 93. Right now, the highest-leveled player on the kingdom's ranking list was only level 88. Moreover, the experts in the area felt a powerful pressure from the group of strangers as if they stood before a small force of high-level great lords. The combined aura could even deter refinement realm experts from approaching. There sure are a lot of people here, Commander, but their levels are pretty low. They clearly haven't received a god's blessing either, a level 92 female ranger commented as she watched the players in the teleportation hall. It seems the main continent's players haven't developed as quickly as those in the shadow world. Only their weapons and equipment are better than ours. Apparently, different areas have varying degrees of development. This is an opportunity for our shadowless adventurer team. Obviously, weapons and equipment are easier to obtain here. We were lucky to find the planar passage in our world so quickly. We should take time to secure a foothold here first, the bald, level 93 youth in black said as he led the group. Star Moon Kingdom is the perfect place for shadowless to establish on the main continent. I want you to investigate the powers in this kingdom. If they're not willing to submit, we'll get rid of them. The 100-plus players promptly split up, and every other player who had overheard the bald youth's order began to panic. Meanwhile, otherworld players began to arrive in the main continent's various kingdoms and empires, intensifying the chaos on the main continent. While otherworld players began to flood the main continent, something surprising occurred in the Gravity Mountain Range's northern fortress. Xiaofan had estimated that it would take some time to lease out the fortress's shops. It would be a while before players discovered the benefits of a medium fortress's shops, after all. However, in less than a day, Dragonheart Island's various powers had claimed over 100 shops for themselves. Although these powers didn't plan to rent the shops long-term, only agreeing to the first month, it instantly earned Xiaofan over 600 million credits. Including the income from Zero Wing City, he had a total of 800 million credits on hand. Once the credits were in his account, Xiaofan instructed Xiao Yu to move forward with their agreed plans. They might not be able to establish many large-scale training centers in Fenglin City, but 7 or 8 small training centers wouldn't be a problem. Furthermore, the branch training centers' main purpose was to promote the virtual combat platform and encourage the city's players to train in the Heaven's Rumble Training Center habitually. Hence, they wouldn't need to purchase a lot of equipment for the branch locations. Once the branches opened to the public, and with Zero Wing's fame, they wouldn't need to worry about a lack of God's Domain players visiting Heaven's Rumble. This would also allow Zero Wing to recruit fresh blood in God's Domain. Xiaofan had also earned a lot of ancient gold from the northern fortress. Normally, a small fortress, at its peak, would only earn 4,000 or 5,000 ancient gold per day, and small fortresses that had recently opened to the public would be lucky to earn 1,000 per day. Fortunately, the northern fortress was unimaginably popular. The various powers players already filled every hotel in the fortress. To reserve every room in a hotel, players would have to pay with ancient gold, not ancient copper or silver. Naturally, Zero Wing's share of the profits would consist of ancient gold, as well. After a single day of business, Zero Wing had earned 7,000 ancient gold from the northern fortress, and that was after splitting the profits with Phoenix Rain. As more time passed and more players visited the fortress, Zero Wing would be able to upgrade its facilities. As basic hotels became advanced hotels, Zero Wing and the Phoenix Pavilion would earn even more ancient gold. Warblood's people would have a heart attack if they saw our profits, guild leader, Blackie said, laughing as he watched the northern fortress's profits increase. It won't be long before our guild secures a foothold in Dragonheart City. With more guild members here, I'd like to see Warblood interfere with our development. Blackie, don't underestimate Warblood. The adventurer team has captured its own fortress, and it still has Starlink's support. It would be unwise to underestimate its development, and Warblood's naval prowess is particularly impressive. Even 13 Thrones watches its step around the adventurer team, Yan Tianqing solemnly warned his companion. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU resources were important for competing guilds, but the deciding factor would come down to the size of one's fist. Warblood might not be a match for Zero Wing in the Gravity Mountain range, but in the Sea of Death, Zero Wing would be at its mercy. Unfortunately, there were more resources available in the Sea of Death than in the Gravity Mountain range. Tianqing is right. Now that we have resources, we need to convert them into combat power. Xiaofan nodded. He then retrieved the Storm speedboat design from his bag and handed it to Yan Tianqing, who would supervise the speedboat's production. They would use the profits they had earned from the northern fortress to acquire the necessary materials. Fortunately, Xiaofan had been stocking up on these materials for a while. When Yan Tianqing saw the Storm speedboat design, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. Although he was not a naval player, he had learned how valuable bronze speedboats were during the several weeks he had spent grinding in the Sea of Death. If Zero Wing had a full fleet of bronze speedboats, they could explore the Sea of Death unhindered. Once he had set Yan Tianqing with everything he needed for the Storm speedboat's production, Xiaofan left the northern fortress. Once he emerged from the World Tower, he used a return scroll to teleport to White River City. He was finally prepared to challenge his Tier 3 promotion quest. Chapter 2305, Tier 3 Promotion Quest Star Moon Kingdom, White River City's Library. Following a level 180, Tier 3 Templar Knight, Xiaofan arrived before the Star Moon Hall on the library's top floor. As he entered the hall and spotted Charlene, who wore luxurious red robes and sat in her throne on the far end of the room, something surprised Xiaofan. Now, he could sense a trace of divine might from Charlene, and it was nothing like the divine might items radiated. Although it wasn't as strong as the divine might from items gods had used, it was incredibly pure. The closer he got to the woman, the stronger the pressure felt. Even with his powerful basic attributes, Xiaofan couldn't step within 10 yards of Charlene. He suspected she was already more powerful than demigods. You're here. Looking at you, I assume you intend to challenge your Tier 3 promotion, am I correct? Charlene asked, giving Xiaofan a natural, human-like smile. She looked at him like an old friend. That's right. Xiaofan nodded. He might be quite powerful, even enough to give the various superpowers a huge headache, but to truly contend with the superpowers, he had to reach Tier 3 at the very least. Once he was a Tier 3 player, he could freely explore level 100+ maps and qualify to become a lord, gaining full rights to manage a territory. As true lords, players could gain full control over the land they had earned. Their authority would no longer be limited to a town or city. Not only would they have the authority to slay anyone they wished within their territory, but they could also hire NPC soldiers to protect the area and remove intruders. This would make it a lot easier to harvest resources within one's territory. Zero Wing had the strength to protect its assets, but it couldn't contend with the various superpowers in the fields. Even an ordinary superpower had countless experts under its command, and Zero Wing would need more time before it could rival these superpowers in that regard. There were only so many level 100+ neutral maps in God's domain, and once players reached level 100, the various superpowers would begin to take their territory seriously. They would no longer be as peaceful. Xiaofang's only option was to become a lord. Once he had that status, not only would Zero Wing's ability to protect itself increase by tenfold, but the guild's development speed would also undergo a qualitative transformation. "Since you've already prepared, I won't waste your time," Charlene said, smiling. She extended a hand toward Xiaofan and continued, 300 mana stones and 20 units of 7 luminaries crystal. Xiaofan's lips twitched when he heard Charlene's price. This was daylight robbery. Since his Tier 3 promotion quest's mana stone cost had been so high, he had prepared over 300 mana stones before revisiting Charlene. Fortunately, he had also prepared 30 units of 7 luminaries crystals just in case. And of course, Charlene casually demanded 90% of the mana stones and 7 luminaries crystals he had on hand. "Here." Xiaofan growled, gritting his teeth. In the end, he had no choice but to hand the items over. Tier 3 was a huge turning point for players, and he was a Blade Saint. His wouldn't be an ordinary promotion quest. He couldn't exactly avoid challenging the quest due to the cost. Not bad. This should just be enough to support the magic array's activation, Charlene said, smiling as she received the mana stones and 7 luminaries crystals. "However, I must warn you that you'll be heading to a special location. The dangers you will encounter there are beyond your imagination. Even a true Tier 3 being would struggle to survive. How much you accomplish will be entirely up to you." Charlene began to chant an incantation, and a threefold magic array appeared in the center of the hall. Gradually, a set of pitch-black doors began to appear, and Xiaofan's knees nearly buckled under the door's horrific pressure. "I'm not going to a level 100 neutral map to find my lost legacy." Xiaofan frowned as he watched the spatial tear form between the black doors. The Tier 3 promotion quest wouldn't be like the previous promotion quests. Since the various kingdoms and empires lacked Tier 3 legacies, players would have to search ancient ruins in level 100+ neutral maps for them. Not even peak legacies were exempt from the process. However, it was clear that he wouldn't be visiting some level 100 neutral map on the main continent. The unexpected development interfered with his plans. His past experiences and knowledge about Tier 3 promotion quests would be useless. Xiaofan didn't give the matter much thought, however, as he approached the black doors. These doors wouldn't remain for long, and if they disappeared before he entered the spatial tear, the system would deem the promotion quest a failure. Not only would he have wasted a ton of valuable resources, but he'd also have to wait a long time before he could attempt the promotion quest again. The moment Xiaofan stepped into the spatial tear, he transformed into a streak of light, vanishing from the large hall. He had no idea how long he had been stuck in the space-time tunnel, but when he reopened his eyes, he found himself on a huge island floating in an endless void. The island was barren and quiet, containing multiple spatial tears that had enough power to tear a mythic monster to shreds. The island's environment was a complete mess. Xiaofan constantly felt some berserk energy assault his body, causing damage and limiting his perception. A void land? Xiaofan was speechless as he examined his surroundings. A void land was a land of death in God's domain. Even a domain realm expert would be as weak as a noob when subjected to a void land's environment, barely able to exhibit any of their combat power. When he spotted the island's level 100+ void creatures, a chill crawled down his spine. Void Worm, Void Creature, Great Lord, Level 101 HP 120 00000/120 0000000 Void Viper, Void Creature, Grand Lord, Level 102 HP 300 00000/300 0000000 Void creatures had extremely high resistance to physical and magical damage. Normally, even Tier 3 players would have to work with a full party to defeat a level 100 Great Lord ranked Void creature. Unfortunately, not only was this barren island home to thousands of Void Worms, but they also moved in groups of 3 to 5. As for the Void Vipers that floated in the air, a single one of them could easily annihilate an entire Tier 3 team. Not even Tier 3 players would survive long on this island, much less Tier 2 players. System: you have accepted your Tier 3 promotion quest. Quest content: locate the Blade Saint legacy sealed in this void land and remove the seal to obtain the legacy. Sure enough, the promotion quest for one of the 10 Saint legacies is vicious. The corners of Xiaofan's lips twitched as he read the system notification. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He'd be at his limit fighting a single void worm. He'd have no choice but to flee if he encountered two at the same time, yet these void worms roamed in such large groups. Just exploring the island would be a problem, not to mention finding the Blade Saint legacy. Fortunately, he was allowed to use items in this void land, and as such, he immediately pulled the Bible of Darkness from his bag and summoned a Tier 3 demon. He summoned Anna and Kite as well. He then relied on the Tier 3 demon as his mount, while Anna and Kite offered support from the sides. The void worms might be a problem for ordinary Tier 3 players, but they were merely practice targets with high HP to Anna and Kite. Their battle with the void worms was completely one-sided, and after just half an hour, 5 void worms had fallen. As they died, the void worms granted Xiaofan a ton of EXP and dropped a crystal that was as dark as night. A mana crystal. Xiaofan could not believe his eyes as he held the crystal. How is this possible? Chapter 2306, Tier 3 Evolution Mana Crystal. To most players, this item was only a relatively rare material or decent energy source, but to Xiaofan, a mana crystal was just as valuable as 7 luminaries crystals. They were so valuable to him because he could use mana crystals to evolve the abyssal blade. Xiaofan had tasked Melancholic Smile to purchase mana crystals for that very purpose, but she had yet to find any. Learning that these void worms dropped the mana crystals had certainly come as a surprise. The abyssal blade was significantly helpful. In its current state, the magic weapon was as powerful as a top-tier epic weapon of the same level. Unfortunately, Xiaofan couldn't afford to level up the weapon due to how many fine gold and dark gold weapons the upgrade required. The higher level a weapon was, the rarer it would be. Obtaining level 90 plus fine gold weapons was quite challenging at this stage of the game, not to mention level 90 plus dark gold weapons. Because its level had stagnated, the abyssal blade wasn't suitable for Xiaofan at this point. However, Xiaofan couldn't just abandon the weapon. Even if he stopped using it, the curse within the abyssal blade would still exist, and he'd periodically have to face the backlashes. Not only would the curse grow stronger as the magic weapon evolved, but it would also grow stronger as time passed, which was why players had been so afraid of magic weapons in Xiaofan's previous life. Although magic weapons could be a massive asset to players, they'd also become a greater burden as players leveled up. Of course, if players could maintain the magic weapons' growth as they reached higher levels, the weapons would offer more pros than cons, and after a certain point, they'd become even stronger than epic weapons. Unfortunately, it was very difficult to maintain that growth rate during the later stages of the game. Otherwise, fewer players would have fallen to their magic weapons backlash in the past. Xiaofan stored the mana crystal in his bag and continued to hunt void worms while steadily approaching the center of the island. The void land was as large as a medium-sized leveling map in the outside world, and as Xiaofan grew closer to the island's core, he encountered more void worms. The monster's respawn rate increased as he traveled, as well. Even with Anna and Kite's help, Xiaofan prioritized caution. While the 2 personal guards could withstand the Great Lord's attacks, he couldn't. Although slaying these void worms was monotonous, the bountiful EXP and occasional mana crystal motivated Xiaofan. He took barely any breaks from hunting the Great Lords. After a full day of combat, Xiaofan's experience bar had reached 99% of level 100. He just needed one more kill to level up, but he decided to wait for a moment. He locked his experience bar and summoned his Thunder Eagle, allowing the flying mount to benefit from the awarded EXP instead. Flying mounts and land mounts had different mechanics. While land mounts' levels would be determined by their owner's level, flying mounts had their own experience bars. This was why nurturing a flying mount was so troublesome. This quest, fortunately, offered the perfect opportunity for Xiaofan to nurture his Thunder Eagle. Flying mounts in God's domain were an exceptional mode of transportation, but they were also capable fighters. For players to grow stronger, they had to constantly improve their levels, equipment, skills, and other aspects. Flying mounts, however, only needed to level up. It was easier for these mounts to evolve through their tiers than it was for players. Thus, it had become common practice for experts to disregard their levels temporarily to level up their flying mounts. The Thunder Eagle was an intermediate extraordinary flying mount, born with the strength of a great lord and extremely high growth potential. At level 100, its combat power might only be at the lower tier 3 rank, but once it reached level 110, it would rise to the intermediate tier 3 rank. At level 120, its combat power would further increase to the tier 3 upper rank standard. Aside from frantically grinding, Xiaofan occasionally logged out to rest his mind and provide guidance for some of his guild members. Guild leader, Warblood and Starlink are growing restless. They're not doing much right now, but I've heard that they've decided to help 13 Thrones capture a medium fortress in the Gravity Mountain range, Blackie reported. Currently, the Northern Fortress's player population is only over 900,000. If Warblood and Starlink succeed, I'm afraid it'll affect the Northern Fortress's development. Should we send people to sabotage their plan? Since the Northern Fortress was the sole medium fortress in the Gravity Mountain range, it generated astronomical sums of credits and ancient gold each day, but if the various powers captured another medium fortress, the Northern Fortress's profits would decrease. That won't be necessary. Although we have a feud with Warblood and Starlink, we have nothing against 13 Thrones, Xiaofan said, shaking his head. Moreover, capturing a medium fortress is easier said than done. Just focus on managing our own fortress. I'm still busy with my tier 3 promotion quest and won't be back anytime soon. For now, try to buy as many plots of land near the World Tower as possible with the ancient gold we've earned. If he hadn't summoned the tier 4 hero, Zero Wing wouldn't have been able to capture the Northern Fortress, even with the Phoenix Pavilion's help. Moreover, securing the lands around the World Tower was far more important than worrying about a fortress in another corner of the Gravity Mountain range. Alright. I'll make the purchases as soon as we have the money, Blackie responded. Although he was a little disappointed that he couldn't cause some trouble for Starlink and Warblood, his anticipation began to build with the thought of the lands near the World Tower. Xiaofan had explained these plots' function, and if Zero Wing could claim every one of the lands available, Dragonheart City's various powers would live in fear of their guild. After training the guild's members, Xiaofan quickly returned to God's domain and continued to venture deeper into the barren island. With the Thunder Eagle as a part of his party, the party's overall DPS had considerably increased, and as a result, Xiaofan was able to advance much faster than before. After 3 days of grinding, Xiaofan had moved into the island's inner region. The 3-day grind also allowed the Thunder Eagle to climb to level 103. Xiaofan knew that flying mounts didn't need as much EXP as players to level up, but he couldn't help his surprise at the Thunder Eagle's leveling speed. Xiaofan had also obtained 73 mana crystals from the slain void worms. His harvest here was more than enough to cover the mana stone cost of entering the void land. When he reached the inner region, he found a translucent barrier enveloping the area. The inner region looked like a completely different world compared to the outer region. The island's outer area had been a barren wasteland, while a lush forest occupied the inner region. Within this lush forest, Xiaofan spotted graves of varying sizes. The smallest were simply dirt mounds, while the larger graves looked like majestic palaces. He also spotted a large number of undead wandering through this graveyard. Forgotten spirit, undead creature, lord, level 101 HP 40,000,000/40,000,000. These forgotten spirits weren't much of a threat. Xiaofan could easily take them out in a one-on-one fight. Unfortunately, these undead moved in groups of several dozen. Not even Xiaofan was confident of surviving a battle against so many Lord-ranked monsters. Each grave was also guarded by heroic spirits of varying strengths. Heroic spirits were the remnants of departed NPC heroes. They might not be as powerful as they had been in life, but the Tier 3 heroic spirits could easily slaughter Tier 3 players, not to mention a lowly Tier 2 player like Xiaofan. Even Tier 3 players have little hope of surviving in this place. Xiaofan could not help but frown at the undead wandering within the magic barrier. He'd have no choice but to flee from a one-on-one battle with a level 100, Tier 3 heroic spirit. Fortunately, he had personal guards like Anna and Kite to support him. Otherwise, finding the Blade Saint legacy would be utterly impossible. The instant Xiaofan stepped through the translucent barrier, however, Kite, Anna, the Tier 3 demons, and his Thunder Eagle vanished. A silencing barrier? Xiaofan stared at the barrier, stunned. God's domain had many types of magic barriers, and although barriers that nullified summoning-type magic arrays were rare, they could be found in certain ancient ruins. Finding such a magic barrier here was a nightmare. An ordinary level 100, Tier 2 expert wouldn't even be a match for the Lord-ranked Forgotten Spirits in a one-on-one fight. Even a domain realm expert would have to flee for their lives when encountering several dozen Forgotten Spirits. As for the level 100, Tier 3 heroic spirits, domain realm experts wouldn't even last more than 3 seconds. It's no wonder why so few people with peak legacies managed to complete their Tier 3 promotion quest. Xiaofan sighed ruefully as he observed the undead around him. With how the Forgotten Spirits were positioned, Xiaofan couldn't find any loopholes to exploit. Defeating these undead would be impossible with the strength of a level 100, Tier 2 player. He would need an entire 100-man team of level 100, Tier 2 experts to accomplish the feat, right? If one's not enough, I just need to face them in a group. Struck with inspiration, Xiaofan stepped through the barrier and summoned Kite and Anna again. He returned to grinding void worms, planning to collect the 100 mana crystals he needed to evolve the Abyssal Blade. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU of the weapons at hand, the Abyssal Blade allowed him to execute the highest number of attacks simultaneously. With 9 Dragon Slash, he could summon 16 Abyssal Blade Phantoms, which not even the Twilight Blade could do. If he could upgrade the Abyssal Blade to Tier 3, 9 Dragon Slash would undergo a qualitative transformation, allowing him to summon even more phantoms. It might just be enough to help him defeat so many monsters. With this plan in mind, Xiaofan spent another day or so slaying void worms, eventually gathering the 100 mana crystals. The instant Xiaofan picked up the 100th mana crystal, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, 100 mana crystals detected. Conditions to evolve the Abyssal Blade met. Do you wish to evolve the Abyssal Blade? Retrieving the long-forgotten magic weapon from his bag, Xiaofan took a deep breath and declared, "Evolve." Chapter 2307, Tier 3 Abyssal Blade. The moment Xiaofan tapped on the Evolve * button, the Abyssal Blade transformed into a cloud of black fog that moved toward his bag. The black fog began to devour every mana crystal in his bag like a ravenous wolf. The mana within the mana crystals was only slightly less pure than within 7 Luminaries crystals, and a single mana crystal contained enough mana to obliterate a small town from the face of the continent. When the Abyssal Blade devoured all 100 mana crystals, space around Xiaofan trembled violently with the transfer of such a frightening amount of energy. At the same time, a dragon's roar echoed across the island. It felt as if space were about to explode, making room for a dragon's arrival. Is this a backlash? Xiaofang's expression darkened. With every evolution, there was a chance that the magic weapon would release a backlash, and each backlash would be stronger than the last. If the weapon's owner couldn't cope with a single backlash, it would cripple their account. Initially, Xiaofan had been confident of contending with a potential second backlash, but based on the mana fluctuations he sensed, he doubted that he had more than a 50% chance of surviving. Fortunately, the mana only fluctuated for a few moments. After 3 seconds, the island returned to normal, and a pitch-black sword, decorated with engraved, draconic patterns, appeared some distance away. Despite standing 5 yards away from the abyssal blade, Xiaofan could feel the magic weapon's intense dragon might weighing him down. His heels even sunk into the ground. Abyssal blade, one-handed sword, magic weapon, attack power plus 4055 all attributes plus 320 attack speed plus 33 ignore levels plus 25 attacks have 70% chance to cause 250% damage. 40% chance to cause 300% damage. Every attack increases damage by 2% to a maximum of 30%. If wielder belongs to a swordsman-related class, all skill levels plus 6. Increase free ability points received for every increase in level by 2 points. Equipment level 80. Can be upgraded, devour 40 level 85 dark gold weapons to upgrade to level 85. Equipment tier 3. Can be evolved, devour 5 god crystals to evolve to tier 4. Additional active skill 1, Phantom Kill, tier 3. Instantly creates a doppelganger under the wielder's control. Doppelganger has 95% of the wielder's attributes and all skills. The wielder can swap positions with the doppelganger at any time. Duration, 2 minutes cooldown, 5 minutes additional active skill 2, Abyssal Bind, tier 3. Binds up to 5 enemies simultaneously and prevents movement, reducing defense and magic resistance by 100%. The higher tiered the target is, the weaker the effect will be. Duration, 5 seconds cooldown, 40 seconds additional active skill 3, 9 Dragon Slash, tier 3. Instantly creates 21 phantoms of the abyssal blade for wielder's use, each phantom sword deals up to 80% damage. Duration, 60 seconds cooldown, 8 minutes additional active skill 4, Abyssal Curse, tier 3. Prevents all targets within a 100-yard radius from moving or attacking for 6 seconds and reduces their attributes by 20% for 10 minutes. Effect doubles if there is only one target in range. Cooldown, 30 minutes additional active skill 5, Dragon Soul, tier 3. Grants a doppelganger a dragon soul, transforming it into a black dragon. The transformed doppelganger will have the same life rating as a black dragon and can use the skill Dragon Breath. Duration, 5 minutes cooldown, 24 hours additional passive skill, Abyssal Will. Improves wielder's physique depending on the surrounding mana density. The higher the mana density, the greater the improvement. Additional Profound Inheritance, Black Emperor, tier 3. When activated, every critical hit will accumulate 1 stack of Death Aura. Each stack can be used to increase all attributes by 4% and attack speed and movement speed by 3% for 12 seconds or to reduce the cooldown of a skill by 5 seconds. Maximum of 27 stacks of Death Aura. Duration, 10 minutes cooldown, 6 hours. The famed smith Alice's personally created the Abyssal Blade using the Black Dragon King's fangs as material. It is one of 36 famed swords, ranking 31st. However, the Black Dragon King himself has cursed this sword. Beyond the immense strength the blade offers, the wielder must face a backlash after a certain amount of time. However, after Jack had remodeled the Abyssal Blade with a star crystal, the strength of the backlash has been reduced greatly. If the wielder is unable to suppress the backlash, the wielder will receive the Black Dragon King's curse, permanently reducing all attributes by 50%. Unable to be dropped. Unable to be traded. Unable to be destroyed. So powerful. Xiaofan was stunned when he saw the evolved Abyssal Blade's attribute panel. The Abyssal Blade's attributes might not compare to the Twilight Blade and Killing Ray quite yet, but its attributes could rival that of a top-tier level 85 epic weapon, despite being only a level 80 magic weapon. However, the improved attributes weren't the most shocking aspect. The Abyssal Blade's skills had drastically improved now that it was a tier 3 weapon. Now, it was the perfect weapon to use against groups. Not even an ordinary fragmented legendary weapon would be its match in this regard. Seeing the tier 3 Abyssal Blade, Xiaofan couldn't even imagine how much it would improve once it reached tier 4. Of course, evolving the magic weapon further would be immensely more difficult than it had been thus far, requiring god crystals, and 5 of them, at that. One could only rely on luck to find god crystals, which were even rarer and more difficult to locate than epic weapons. Xiaofan then unequipped Killing Ray, replacing it with the Abyssal Blade. So, this is the Abyssal Blade's power after another evolution? As he equipped the magic weapon, Xiaofan was astounded. His attack power and basic attributes might have decreased, but he was more compatible with the Abyssal Blade than he was with Killing Ray. The weapon felt like an extension of his body in his hand, and it was now unimaginably sharp. In its current state, the Abyssal Blade could easily slice through a level 100+ Great Lord scales. Moreover, the magic weapon's effects had substantially improved, and he could feel his physique growing considerably stronger. Despite replacing Killing Ray with a lower-leveled weapon, his overall combat power hadn't decreased in the slightest. Rather, it had risen. After taking a moment to familiarize himself with the upgraded Abyssal Blade, Xiaofan shifted his attention to the graves within the inner region. The goal of his promotion quest was to locate the Lost Blade Saint Legacy. Obviously, it should be inside one of those graves. The countless forgotten spirits wandering through the forest and the heroic spirits guarding each grave were the only obstacles in his way. A few minutes ago, Xiaofan had been helpless against the wandering forgotten spirits, but now that he had the tier 3 Abyssal Blade, defeating the undead wouldn't be a problem. Now, he only had to figure out a way to distract the heroic spirits while he opened the graves. Unfortunately, since he didn't know which grave contained the legacy, he decided to challenge heroic spirit guarding the nearest and smallest grave. The instant Xiaofan crossed through the translucent barrier, the undead roaming near the chosen grave sensed Xiaofang's aura and charged toward him. Although the forgotten spirits didn't have very high intellect, even a peak expert would have to flee if several dozen attacked together. Go! Xiaofan immediately activated 9 Dragon Slash. Like a group of experts, the 21 Abyssal Blade Phantoms flew forth to open a path for Xiaofan. Although each phantom only possessed 90% of Xiaofang's strength, the attribute was just as high as an actual level 100, tier 3 players. As a result, the Abyssal Blade Phantoms effortlessly suppressed the approaching forgotten spirits. With one exchange, the Phantoms shoved aside the several dozen undead, allowing Xiaofan to reach the small grave. This is a resting place for the dead. The living have no place here, the spear-wielding tier 3 heroic spirit guarding the grave bellowed as he thrust his spear at Xiaofan. Forgotten heroic spirit, undead, tier 3 berserker king, level 10 HP 54,000/54,000,000. Although the heroic spirit did not have a lot of HP, he employed an advanced combat technique with that simple thrust, causing his opponent to ignore the weapon unconsciously. Moreover, the attack contained peak tier 3 power, easily enough to repulse level 100+ Grand Lords. If this attack struck a tier 3 player, they'd die instantly. Witnessing the heroic spirit's strength, Xiaofan lost any confidence in defeating the undead. Fortunately, he didn't actually plan to fight the heroic spirit. Xiaofan responded to the attack by using Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger forward while activating Defensive Blade to block the strike. Xiaofan then rushed toward the grave. The moment Xiaofan touched the grave, a prompt window appeared before him. System, do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Ecstatic, Xiaofan activated the grave. However, a loading bar appeared the moment he did. Activating the grave would require a total of 8 seconds. When the heroic spirit sensed the grave's activation, he flew into a rage. Ignoring Xiaofan's doppelganger, the heroic spirit dashed toward the offending player. Sure enough, this won't be that easy. As the heroic spirit ran toward him, Xiaofan stopped holding back. He had his doppelganger activate its legacy berserk skill, Blade Liberation, focusing all of his attention on controlling the doppelganger as it attacked the heroic spirit. Lightning flash. A web of sword lights enveloped the heroic spirit, yet the undead didn't seem concerned in the least. He spun and met the attack with his spear. Pung! 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 The sounds of clanging metal echoed throughout the forest. Not only had the heroic spirit blocked every sword light the doppelganger had sent at him, but he managed to do so without stumbling a single step backward. The doppelganger wasn't a match for the heroic spirit, but Xiaofan didn't care. His only goal was to delay the Tier 3 heroic spirit for 8 seconds, not defeat him. Xiaofan finally absorbed a portion of the grave owner's legacy as he sacrificed his doppelganger. As he did, a legacy completion rate section had appeared in his quest window. System, legacy completion rate 15%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? So, that's how this works. Xiaofan immediately understood how he was supposed to complete his promotion quest. Every grave in this lush forest contained the Blade Saint legacy, but each grave contained a different completion rate of the legacy, which couldn't be combined. It was up to him to decide how much of the legacy he wanted to leave with. Following which, Xiaofan abandoned the completion rate he had acquired from the small grave and escaped through the barrier. The moment he crossed the magic barrier, the forgotten spirits and heroic spirit chasing him gave up and returned to their original positions. Now that he understood his quest's mechanics, Xiaofan set his sights on the higher quality graves in the island's inner region. Naturally, the more magnificent graves were guarded by stronger heroic spirits. The largest grave sat within the forest's core, as opulent as a palace with a level 100, Tier 4 heroic spirit standing guard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The graves that were a grade inferior to the palace-like grave in the center were protected by heroic spirits with titles. Heroic spirits that earned a title after their deaths had been heroes among heroes during their lives. Killing apex experts of the same tier would have been child's play. Although they had lost a significant portion of the strength after death, they could still kill apex experts with little to no effort. I can only give it a try. Xiaofan gritted his teeth as he set his sights on a greatsword-wielding, titled heroic spirit. He knew he had no hope of activating the grandest grave in the cemetery. The gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences was massive, let alone the gap between Tier 2 and Tier 4. The moment the Tier 4 heroic spirit noticed him, he'd die. However, he wasn't willing to settle for third-grade graves. After all, the legacy's completion rate would severely affect the Tier 3 promotion quest's rewards. At the very least, he had to try for the second-grade graves. Once his skills cooldowns had finished, Xiaofan dashed into the inner region once more, running straight for a grave that was the size of a small high-rise. Chapter 2308, Abyssal Blades Might. Xiaofan's target was near the center of the forest. Simply approaching it would be incredibly difficult due to the groups of forgotten spirits that moved closer together near the forest's core. If Xiaofan relied on his own strength to reach the grave, he wouldn't get close to it, much less activate it. Several hundred forgotten spirits flew toward him, and Xiaofan felt his scalp go numb. Fortunately, he was barely able to keep the forgotten spirits out of attack range with the 21 abyssal blades fighting for him. 9 Dragon Slash had a time limit, however, so he couldn't stop the undead like this forever. Although Xiaofan was confident that he could escape these monsters with his life, if he couldn't keep the forgotten spirits at bay, that would be it. He wouldn't be able to do anything more. If he wished to secure the second-grade legacy, it was crucial that he utilized 9 Dragon Slash's duration efficiently. It took me 42 seconds to reach this grave, which is about as long as I estimated. Glancing at 9 Dragon Slash's remaining duration, Xiaofan breathed a sigh of relief. I should be able to activate the grave within the remaining time. There were 2 reasons that Xiaofan had passed up the highest grade grave. Naturally, the first was the Tier 4 heroic spirit that guarded it. His second reason was the lack of time. Reaching and activating the second-grade graves within 9 Dragon Slash's 60-second duration was his limit. Before Xiaofan could catch his breath, the silver-armored, greatsword-wielding heroic spirit that guarded the gravestone abruptly opened his eyes. A faint, red barrier then enveloped the gravesite, decreasing Xiaofan's basic attributes and physique by 20%. Urdia, Flame Knight, Heroic Spirit, Tier 3 Berserker King, Level 101 HP 78,000/78,000,000 A domain. Xiaofang's expression darkened as he stared at Urdia. Xiaofan had assumed that Urdia had the strength to instant-kill Tier 3 players, but he had never thought that the heroic spirit would be this powerful. Urdia might not have a lot more HP than the heroic spirit he had fought earlier, but he was definitely much stronger. Purely regarding basic attributes, he had to be 30% stronger than the forgotten heroic spirit. In combination with its domain, which only Tier 4 NPCs and above could grasp, Urdia could squash Tier 3 players like ants. I commend your bravery, adventurer. Over the several millennia I have stood guard, you're the first to dare approach in search of the Blade Saint's legacy. I hope you can offer some entertainment, Urdia leisurely commented. Unlike the forgotten heroic spirit, which had attacked immediately, he joked around like a player as he slowly approached Xiaofan. Seeing this, a chill crawled down Xiaofang's spine. They might be dead heroes, but heroic spirits weren't considered NPCs in God's domain. Because of this, their intellect shouldn't be as high as NPCs. However, that was obviously not the case for Urdia. This was also the first time Xiaofan had encountered such an intelligent heroic spirit. Seeing that Urdia was already 50 yards away, Xiaofan activated the Ring of Gospel's miniature world and Ring of Brilliance as a precaution. Unfortunately, Xiaofan could tell that wouldn't be enough after the 2 skills had taken effect. He then activated Blade Liberation to bolster his basic attributes further, and at the same time, he activated the Twilight Blade's Twilight of the Gods and Twilight's Shadow, splitting into 8 clones. With Twilight of the Gods and Blade Liberation active, Xiaofang's physical doppelgangers inherited the skill's effects. Now, every one of his doppelgangers had the strength to rival Grand Lords of the same level. If 8 level 100 Grand Lords worked together, they could even take on a level 100 mythic monster. However, before Xiaofan could control his doppelgangers, Urdia vanished, reappearing before Xiaofang's clones. The heroic spirit brandished his flaming greatsword, sending 8 crimson sword lights at all 8 doppelgangers. Xiaofang's doppelgangers reacted quickly, intercepting the attacks with their swords. However, the moment the crimson sword lights met the doppelgangers' blades, the impact threw them over a dozen yards before they slammed into the ground, their swords humming. Each doppelganger instantly lost over 20,000 HP. A bronze combat technique? Xiaofang's expression turned grim when he saw the outcome. Extreme Slash. Although Urdia had only executed 8 extreme slashes, 1 fewer than Miracle Dragon's 9 extreme slashes, Urdia's mastery with the technique was far greater than Miracle Dragon's. He had mastered the advanced combat technique until he had upgraded it into a bronze combat technique. This was a Tier 3 heroic spirit that could use bronze combat techniques. No one would have believed Xiaofan if he had told them about Urdia's abilities in his previous life. Some might even mock him for his stupidity. Heroic spirits might have once been heroes, but they weren't anymore. They particularly lacked intellect and weren't even a match for ordinary NPCs regarding this aspect. Seeing a heroic spirit execute an advanced combat technique was already quite impressive. Most Tier 3 NPCs couldn't even master a bronze combat technique, much less a Tier 3 heroic spirit. And yet, the impossible had just happened. After repelling the 8 doppelgangers, Urdia shifted his gaze to Xiaofan's main body. He executed Flame Charge, transforming into a fiery meteor as he flew toward the swordsman. Based on how this flame charge appeared, Urdia's skill completion rate should be 99% or 100%. Xiaofan didn't dare take Urdia's charge head-on. If the heroic spirit had already thrown his doppelgangers, he could definitely send Xiaofan flying. Xiaofan activated Phantom Kill, summoning another doppelganger and having it activate Blade Liberation and Defensive Blade to intercept the approaching Berserker King. If he died during his Tier 3 promotion quest, he'd have to wait a long time before he could challenge it again. It was a risk he wasn't willing to take. However, the moment Xiaofan's doppelganger activated Defensive Blade, Urdia cancelled his flame charge and thrust his flaming greatsword into the ground. Dozens of fiery blades rose from the dirt, flying toward the doppelganger. Tier 3 skill, Storm Garrote. Defensive Blade's block counts were exhausted in an instant. Seeing this, Xiaofan had no choice but to focus most of his attention on his doppelganger and executed Sword's Orbit. When the galaxy of stars and the flaming blades met, both attacks shattered. Although the doppelganger had successfully blocked the attacks, it had been forced to stumble over a dozen steps backward. Moreover, each attack had devoured nearly 10,000 of the doppelganger's HP. With just one skill, Urdia had dealt over -200,000 damage. As they kept the forgotten spirits away from the gravesite, the Abyssal Blade Phantom's duration continued to decrease, and Xiaofan's doppelganger couldn't keep Urdia distracted. It began to make Xiaofan even more nervous. If he activated twofold Berserk, he could hold Urdia off, but he needed to activate the grave with his main body. There was no point in trying to distract the heroic spirit himself. He intended to reserve absolute domain for his escape from this place. Even if he activated the grave and obtained the legacy contained within, he would fail his quest without it. Your doppelgangers are quite good, but this is as far as you'll get. Urdia declared, chuckling when he realized Xiaofan's doppelganger had survived his Storm Garrote. Urdia pulled his greatsword from the ground and appeared before the doppelganger. He executed 8 extreme slashes once more, but this time, he concentrated all 8 attacks on a single target. Dragon Soul. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Xiaofan understood that if his doppelganger died, this quest would come to an end. Hence, he decided to use the Abyssal Blade's strongest skill, Dragon Soul. Right now, every attribute point mattered. Xiaofan's doppelganger roared, the sound filling the entire forest. As it did, the doppelganger transformed into a 10-meter-tall, pitch-black dragon. It had more than doubled in size than when the Abyssal Blade had only been a Tier 2 weapon. Seeing the 8 sword lights fly toward it, Xiaofan's doppelganger swiped a single claw to block them all. Boom! The sword lights slammed into the doppelganger's claw, and an intense shockwave shook the forest, only fading after extending 100 yards away. A spatial tear had even appeared before the dragon's claw, and the doppelganger only stumbled a step back. Chapter 2309, Blade Saint Legacy secured so strong. Xiaofan was surprised to see his doppelganger only lose a little over 5,000 HP after receiving Urdia's 8 extreme slashes. Although his doppelganger had already been quite powerful with Dragon Soul active, nearly invincible among beings of the same tier, it had grown even stronger, especially its strength and defense. In these 2 attributes, his doppelganger could practically rival Tier 4 mythic monsters. Moreover, the size of the black dragon's body afforded Xiaofan plenty of advantages. Before the black dragon's 10-meter-tall frame, Urdia looked like little more than a small animal. The doppelganger wouldn't have any issue stopping the heroic spirit's attacks. However, Urdia didn't pause after his attack failed. He immediately appeared before the black dragon's head, his flaming greatsword transforming into a colossal pillar of fire. Tier 3 Taboo Skill, Burning Sword. When the fire pillar completed its transformation, it stretched across 100 yards. The black dragon looked tiny before the flaming weapon, and Urdia swung it down on the doppelganger. Not even Xiaofan could escape the pillar's range, much less the black dragon. Don't think I'm so easy to kill. As the fire pillar descended, Xiaofan had his black dragon use dragon breath. Unlike the dragon breath skill from his heavenly dragon's breath ring, the black dragon's ability was the real deal. According to legend, a tier 5 dragon breath could vaporize an entire city instantly. The true dragon breath was easily more powerful than any taboo skill or curse, essentially rivaling divine arts. The black dragon opened its maw, and a horrific amount of mana concentrated between its jaws. In the blink of an eye, a pitch-black energy ball as large as a small house had taken shape, and as the black dragon released a deafening roar, the energy ball reformed as a pillar of pitch-black light, firing toward the heroic spirit's pillar of fire. Boom! The dragon breath and burning sword slammed into each other, creating a shockwave that shook their surroundings and didn't dissipate until it had spread 500 yards away. At the point of impact, space had crumbled, forming a black hole. It felt as if Armageddon had begun. Sure enough, the true dragon breath is far more powerful. Xiaofan could not help but be astonished when he saw Urdia being sent flying. Xiaofan had only hoped that the black dragon would stop Urdia's killing move. He hadn't actually expected the doppelganger to win that exchange, dealing over -30,000 damage to the heroic spirit. Urdia wasn't in danger of dying after losing 30,000 HP, but it was enough damage for the black dragon to hold the heroic spirit's aggro. Now, Urdia's focus had turned away from Xiaofan's main body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xiaofan charged at the gravestone. System: do you wish to activate the grave and absorb a portion of the grave owner's legacy? Without any hesitation, Xiaofan activated the grave the moment the prompt window appeared. Like the previous grave, a loading bar appeared when he activated. However, this loading bar required 12 seconds, rather than the 8 seconds the previous grave had required. Xiaofan celebrated the fact that he had decided to keep absolute defense in reserve. Had he used the skill to stop Urdia, rather than rely on Dragon Soul, he would have died halfway through the activation process. Unfortunately, the instant Xiaofan activated the grave, Urdia went berserk. Ignoring the black dragon, the heroic spirit dashed toward Xiaofan. Only a little over 100 yards separated Urdia and Xiaofan, and a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit would only need a few steps to cross that distance. However, the black dragon intercepted Urdia near the halfway mark, using its massive frame to keep the heroic spirit away from Xiaofan. The black dragon then swiped a claw at its foe. The black dragon's claw was the size of a car, and although Urdia sensed the incoming attack, he couldn't dodge it in time, relying on his greatsword to block it. As the claw slid along the massive blade, dazzling sparks flew from the weapon. Urdia knocked away the black dragon's claw with his greatsword. Now, he fully displayed the strength of a Tier 3 heroic spirit. Even a Tier 2 dragon would find him a difficult opponent. Fortunately, there wasn't a particularly large difference between the two combatants' basic attributes. Although the heroic spirit had knocked away the black dragon's claw, the dragon steadily remained in its original position. It had only taken a little over -2,000 damage from the clash. The black dragon had tens of millions of HP, so this amount of damage was nothing. Realizing this, Urdia stopped relying on brute force to break past the black dragon. Instead, he executed a combat technique, transforming into 7 phantoms that charged at Xiaofan's main body. Advanced Combat Technique, Flowing Shadow. The 7 phantoms looked and felt exactly the same, not even Xiaofan could tell the difference. But he wasn't ready to give up just yet. In response, he executed lightning slash through his black dragon. As a bronze combat technique, Xiaofan even had trouble executing lightning flash with his main body, not to mention with a doppelganger, but the black dragon's physique was far superior to his, so Xiaofan barely managed to pull it off. 14 claw strikes then plowed into the 7 phantoms. Pung! 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 Metallic clangs echoed through the cemetery as Urdia blocked all 14 strikes. The black dragon lost over 30,000 HP and stumbled a step back, but it had achieved its goal and stopped Urdia's advance. Only, Xiaofan had paled from the effort of executing lightning flash with the black dragon. It consumed so much concentration. Xiaofan could feel a wave of exhaustion wash over him. He had expended significantly more concentration when executing the bronze combat technique through the black dragon than when he used the technique himself. Of course, Urdia hadn't given up. He executed Flowing Shadow again, trying to reach Xiaofan. With no other options, Xiaofan continued to rely on lightning flash to stop Urdia. 2 times. 3 times. 4 times. Every time Xiaofan executed lightning flash, a considerable portion of his concentration slipped away. By the time he executed the technique for the 6th time, he felt mentally lethargic. However, he still needed 5 more seconds to complete the activation process. By the time Xiaofan executed lightning flash a 9th time, his complexion was as white as paper. He felt a stinging pain in his head, and the world seemed to spin around him. Now, he couldn't even control the abyssal blade phantoms to stop the swarming undead. A large number of forgotten spirits flew toward Xiaofan, and Urdia circled the black dragon, appearing before Xiaofang's main body. The heroic spirit swung his flaming greatsword down on the swordsman. 8 extreme slashes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. 8 massive sword lights appeared and threatened to devour Xiaofan completely. When the 8 sword lights were only an inch away from him, Xiaofan gritted his teeth and activated Absolute Domain. Golden, divine runes immediately began to appear on his body. As the 8 sword lights crossed that final inch, they came to an abrupt halt against the divine runes, unable to touch Xiaofan. With Absolute Domain's protection, neither Urdia or the Forgotten Spirits could harm Xiaofan. Needless to say, they couldn't stop Xiaofan from activating the grave either. System, Legacy Completion Rate 85%. Do you wish to accept this legacy? Chapter 23:10, Urdia vs. Anna. As soon as he saw the system notification, Xiaofan accepted the legacy. He didn't know how good a legacy with an 85% completion rate would be, but it was undoubtedly better than the 15% legacy he had found earlier. After Xiaofan accepted the legacy, countless divine runes began to flow from the grave toward him, forming a glowing imprint on the back of his hand. Suddenly, Xiaofan bore the mark of a purple-gold sword. The moment the mark formed, Urdia descended into madness. His muscles bulged, and a cloak of fire enveloped his frame. The temperature around him soared, and the flaming cloak burned the earth under his feet to black ash. If Xiaofan hadn't activated Absolute Domain, he'd likely lose astonishing amounts of HP due to his proximity to the heroic spirit. With Urdia going into full berserk mode and his Absolute Domain's duration almost up, Xiaofan switched the 7 luminaries' rings aura of earth to the aura of wind and activated Gale Domain to make a hasty retreat. While all forms of teleportation were prohibited in the Voidland's inner area, flying, fortunately, was not. Gale Domain was Xiaofang's only hope of escaping from the inner area. Without it, he wouldn't have any chance of leaving the inner region even if he had the legacy. He no longer had 9 dragons slashed to rely on, and he had a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit after him. However, before Xiaofan could leave the grave, Urdia charged forth like a meteor. The heroic spirit was so fast that not even the black dragon could stop him in time. Boom! Urdia crashed into Xiaofan, and the golden, divine runes that protected him actually trembled. This hadn't even happened when Urdia had hacked and slashed at Xiaofan earlier. The heroic spirit proceeded to brandish his flaming greatsword at Xiaofan, over and over. For a moment, even Xiaofan was helpless against the countless sword lights. He couldn't keep up with the speed of any of these attacks. Urdia's attack speed wasn't that much faster than his, but he couldn't keep up with the heroic spirit's reaction speed. With Urdia's basic attributes, the heroic spirit could finish Xiaofan off in 2 or 3 hits, even if Xiaofan activated twofold berserk. Absolute Domain only had 6 seconds remaining, and Xiaofan was still nearly 1,500 yards away from the inner region's barrier. Throwing caution to the wind, he flew straight for the barrier. Despite the fact that Urdia couldn't fly, the undead had no issues keeping up with Xiaofan, continuously attacking the fleeing swordsman. Every one of Urdia's attacks had enough power to injure mythic monsters. Xiaofan would have already died several times if it hadn't been for Absolute Domain's protection. 5 seconds. 3 seconds. 1 second. Unfortunately, Xiaofan's flying speed was fast, but he couldn't reach the barrier within 6 seconds. He was still roughly 500 yards from his target when Absolute Domain's effects wore off. As soon as they did, Xiaofan felt a scorching heat envelop his body, dealing minus 10,000 damage per second. Seeing the divine runes fade from Xiaofang's body, Urdia sneered at his prey. He pushed off the ground and arrived before Xiaofan in an instant, plunging his flaming greatsword down on Xiaofang's head. 8 extreme slashes. This time, every one of the 8 sword lights contained Tier 4 power. Not even the Black Dragon would be strong enough to block the attack, much less Xiaofan. Fortunately, Xiaofan had prepared for this moment and activated Defensive Blade. Pung! 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 Another series of metallic clangs echoed throughout the forest. Urdia had exhausted over half of Defensive Blade's block counts in that one exchange. By the time Defensive Blade ended, Xiaofan had only moved 50 yards closer to the barrier. As Urdia was about to launch another attack, Xiaofan activated Abyssal Bind. Over 20 pitch-black chains emerged from the void, binding Urdia and forcing the heroic spirit to a grinding halt. At Tier 3, Abyssal Bind could hold a target for up to 5 seconds, and it should be 100% effective against a Tier 3 being like Urdia. It was also Xiaofang's final trump card. Pung! However, before Xiaofan could relax, he heard the sound of a chain shattering. When he had gone berserk, Urdia had become nearly stronger than a mythic monster. It had only taken the heroic spirit an instant to shatter one of the chains. As if they were made of paper, the other chains began to break, one after another. For the crime of desecrating a saint's grave, you will die. Urdia bellowed as he swung his freed arms, slashing his greatsword at Xiaofan, who stood over 50 yards away. As Urdia swung his greatsword, a torrent of fire swept toward Xiaofan. Xiaofan spun, meeting the attack with his swords as the flames were about to hit him. Void Shield. Boom! The Void Shield, which had 10 times Xiaofang's maximum HP, nearly shattered as a result of the attack, and the impact threw Xiaofan backward over 30 yards. What a frightening move! Xiaofan silently celebrated when he saw that his Void Shield had only cracked. If he hadn't responded appropriately, that attack would have killed him. Urdia was far more powerful than Xiaofan had imagined. Had he allowed his strength and greed to blind him, challenging the largest grave instead, he would have died the moment his Absolute Domain's duration ended. Meanwhile, thanks to Urdia's attack, Xiaofan and the heroic spirit were now separated by 100 yards. Although Abyssal Bind wouldn't hold down Urdia for 5 seconds, it should be able to keep him in place for 2. Fortunately, as a Tier 3 heroic spirit, Urdia couldn't attack a target that was so far away. In the remaining 2 seconds, Xiaofan widened the gap between him and his pursuer by more than 300 yards. Urdia's movement speed was much higher than Xiaofang's, but during a chance, Urdia would need some time to get within attack range. Meanwhile, Xiaofan continued to move closer to the barrier. 150 yards. 100 yards. 50 yards. When Urdia was less than 80 yards away from Xiaofan and was about to bombard the fleeing swordsman once more, Xiaofan finally slipped through the magic barrier. Enraged, Urdia sent another wave of fire at Xiaofan, but this time, Xiaofan retrieved a summon guard scroll and called forth Anna. As Anna appeared before him, Xiaofan breathed a sigh of relief. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He might not be a match for a titled, Tier 3 heroic spirit, but that wasn't the case for Anna. Anna was an epic guard with a 113-point growth potential. She might not rival an NPC hero of the same tier, but she wasn't far from it. She'd have no problems holding off Urdia. Calmly, Anna swung her staff and cast a spell in response to Urdia's fiery attack. A black-white, twofold magic array appeared before the personal guard. The moment Urdia's flames encountered the array, it looked like they had crashed into the side of a rocky mountain. No matter how much fire crashed into and burned the magic array, they didn't do any damage. All right. Let's leave. With Urdia chasing after him, even after he had crossed the inner region's magic barrier, Xiaofan immediately activated the Tier 2 group instantaneous teleportation scroll he had pulled from his bag earlier, leaving the island with Anna by his side. Chapter 23:11, Mana Body Star Moon Kingdom, White River City. Once Xiaofan and Anna had arrived in the Void Land safe zone, he used a return scroll and teleported back to White River City. However, he nearly thought he had arrived at the wrong place when he emerged from the teleportation array. Many of the players in the teleportation hall had already reached level 90, and there were quite a few level 91 players among the crowd. Not even Dragonheart Island's experts should have reached this level yet. He had only been busy with his Tier 3 promotion quest for a few days. The effects of the planar passages opening early are so drastic. The open planar passages was the only explanation Xiaofan could think of. The planar passages activation wouldn't just lead to new players on the main continent, it would also bring in an abundance of resources, including leveling resources. During Xiaofang's previous life, the planar passages activation had triggered a leveling frenzy among the main continent's players, but it had been nothing compared to this. However, after giving the matter some more thought, Xiaofan knew such a situation wasn't impossible. His presence in God's domain had already caused a significant butterfly effect, and players in this life leveled much faster than in the past. With the planar passages activating before mainstream players had even reached level 100, the increased resources would have a greater effect on players. With so many excellent grinding spots available, it was only natural that players would level up faster than before. As Xiaofan was about to leave the teleportation hall, a 100-man team of independent players walked into the building. Noticing the team's arrival, many players in the hall turned their attention to the newcomers, chatting quietly amongst themselves. Quick, look! It _ Silver Arrow. They must be heading out to raid another level 95 team dungeon. I wonder when our adventurer team will be ready to do the same. Your adventurer team? Dream on. Even the Black Dragon Empire's players are just starting to raid level 95 team dungeons, not to mention Star Moon Kingdom's players. Moreover, Silver Arrow was one of the first adventurer teams to join the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance, and it's received a lot of help from the Shadow Empire Adventurer Team, L. I guess you're right. But joining the Shadowless Adventurer Alliance is so difficult. I've heard that many of the well-known adventurer teams from the neighboring kingdoms have been rejected. That's right. The passing rate is incredibly low, but as long as an adventurer team becomes a member, it'll undergo a metamorphosis. Not only will its overall strength significantly increase, but not even first-rate guilds and superpowers experts would dare to mess with it. The various players discussing the Silver Arrow Adventurer team did so in envy. Most of Silver Arrow's members had already reached level 92, which not even Superpower's main force members had reached. The surrounding players were even more jealous when they saw the equipment Silver Arrow's members wore. Every member of the adventurer team had a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment. Although many expert players had climbed to level 90 or above due to the planar passages, very few had acquired level 90 weapons and equipment, much less top-tier items. With a full set of level 90 fine gold equipment, players would qualify to raid level 95 team dungeons. The Otherworld's adventurer alliances have already developed this far? Xiaofan had to admit that he was a little surprised to see Silver Arrow's members. The Otherworld's adventurer teams had only begun to form adventurer alliances after the main continent's various powers had tried to invade these Otherworlds multiple times in the past. The adventurer alliances had then relied on independent players to contest for the level 100+ neutral maps on the main continent, at which point, many of the main continent's powers had begun to perish. Xiaofan had never thought the butterfly effect would be so massive that Otherworld's powers would form adventurer alliances by this stage of the game. With this, these Otherworld powers would pose a much greater threat to the main continent's powers than they had during his previous life. After the commotion Silver Arrow's team had caused, Xiaofan rushed out of the teleportation hall and made his way to the library. He had thought that he was far ahead of most players since he had reached level 100 and completed his Tier 3 promotion quest. He also had Cola and the others, who had already reached level 95 and beyond. They should reach level 100 soon. However, it seemed that the butterfly effect he had caused would be disastrous for him. If he couldn't quickly become a lord of a neutral map, as the various superpowers in the past had, both he and Zero Wing would vanish into history. Half an hour later, Xiaofan arrived at the top floor of White River City's library. He found Charlene quietly reading an ancient tome from her throne at the far end of the Star Moon Hall. "You really know how to surprise people. I thought you'd be stuck there for several months," Charlene said, smiling as she pulled her gaze from the book and looked at Xiaofan. "Are you really prepared to inherit your legacy? You only have one opportunity. Your performance will greatly affect your future." "Yes, I'm ready." Xiaofan nodded. The Tier 3 promotion quest consisted of 2 parts. Locating the lost legacy was the first part, and inheriting it was the second. The second part was also the most important of the promotion quest, in which, one would change their body's mana framework. As a major turning point in God's domain, players' physiques and their body's mana framework would transform when they reached Tier 3. Of course, not all mana frameworks were equal. The difference in their strengths would even exist among players with ordinary Tier 3 classes. Players inherited a variety of legacies, and those with different mana frameworks would display varying levels of strength. However, these differences wouldn't display in a player's physique, but would affect the world's rules. For example, Tier 2 players could only survive for a short time in level 100+ neutral maps due to the area's environments, even if they just stood there and did nothing. In comparison, Tier 3 players could survive for a long time in a level 100+ neutral map due to their body's mana framework. The stronger a player's mana framework was, the greater their survivability would be in poor environments. Their mana framework would also largely impact their stamina and concentration recovery rates. This was why Tier 3 classes had such a huge impact in God's domain. Although Xiaofan had already obtained his legacy, he wasn't out of the woods yet. His ability to inherit the legacy was far more important. Xiaofan had only completed a Tier 3 bronze legacy in the past, and although the bronze legacy had been among the best of its peers, and he had formed a nearly perfect mana body, it hadn't been enough to get him through his Tier 4 promotion quest. Normally, only players with a silver-ranked mana body could survive in the harsh environments that served as the venue for Tier 4 promotion quests. As a result, he had always been a step away from clearing the quest in his previous life. Of course, if he had had a piece of legendary equipment back then, the results would have been different. Even a piece of fragmented legendary equipment would have changed the outcome significantly. Unfortunately, he never managed to find one, so he hadn't been able to cross that threshold. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Alright, this is your decision, but you must remember that your time is limited. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Charlene warned. Seeing how determined Xiaofan was to see the rest of his promotion quest through, she began to chant the incantation. The sword mark on the back of Xiaofan's right hand began to burn, and at the same time, countless divine runes appeared across his body, gradually forming a gigantic, fourfold magic array. 3 windows displaying mana body samples then appeared before him, each more complex than the last. Xiaofan was ecstatic the moment he saw the magic array and sample mana bodies. The number of layers the magic array had, which would construct the mana body, represented the rank of the mana body that could be created. A single-layered magic array represented bronze rank, a 2-layered magic array represented silver rank, and so on. The mana body samples represented the complete mana body standard. The first sample represented the basic standard, the second represented the intermediate standard, and the third represented the advanced standard. However, the magic array that enveloped Xiaofan now had 4 layers. He had never heard of a fourfold magic array creating a mana body before. Chapter 23:12 Advanced Epic. Once Charlene had formed the magic array, a series of system notification rang in Xiaofan's ears. System, congratulations on completing your Tier 3 promotion quest and obtaining the Blade Saint Legacy. Legacy completion rate 85%. Advanced Epic Legacy received. You have 4 hours to construct your mana body. System, congratulations on being the first player to complete the Tier 3 promotion quest. You will have 1 additional hour to construct your mana body. Epic rank? Xiaofan was stunned when he read the system notifications. The highest rank mana body he had heard of during his previous life had only been gold rank, and only 1 out of every 10,000 experts had earned a gold-ranked mana body during their Tier 3 promotion quests. These experts had been powerhouses in level 100+ neutral maps, strong enough to give the various superpowers massive headaches. A gold mana body provided more than high adaptability to harsh environments, it also elevated players' stamina and concentration recovery rates to extraordinary highs. Players' stamina and concentration would recover by absorbing the mana around them. Depending on the density of the mana in the area, their recovery rates would increase by 30% to 60%. With such a significant improvement to their stamina and concentration recovery rates, players would no longer have to rely on stamina equipment, replacing such items with equipment that provided more raw power. This was why players with gold mana bodies were so much stronger than ordinary experts and could freely roam in level 100+ neutral maps. Even superpowers would find these players quite challenging to hunt down. This was also why the various superpowers' influence on independent players would significantly decrease when they reached Tier 3, even to the extent that top adventurer teams could begin to contend with superpowers. The Midnight Tea Party was a prime example of this. After level 100, players had had an absurdly difficult time trying to join the Midnight Tea Party during Xiaofan's previous life. Once the adventurer team's members had reached Tier 3, a gold-ranked mana body had become a requirement for joining the team. Even superpowers had been helpless against an entire group of experts with gold mana bodies in level 100+ neutral maps. And Xiaofan hadn't even heard of an epic mana body. Moreover, he now had a total of 5 hours to construct his mana body. In the past, he had only had 1 hour to construct his bronze mana body, and players with gold mana bodies had only been given 2 hours. The process of constructing a mana body was mostly the same across the board. The outcome depended on how much one could complete in the allotted time, and one's progress depended on how much time they invested in the trials. You can begin your mana body's construction now. Remember, you only have 5 hours. If you fail to complete a mana body before time runs out, the magic array will grant you the most basic mana body available, and your efforts will have gone to waste, Charlene reminded Xiaofan seriously. Understood. He nodded, understanding how important this matter was. Immediately, Xiaofan carefully inspected the 3 mana body samples hovering before him. Each of the mana bodies displayed was different and more complicated than the last. The simplest of the 3 was several times more complex than the Peak Bronze Legacy's mana body he had obtained in the past. Not only did these samples involve magic arrays, but they also required divine runes and refined mana manipulation. Any ordinary player might be able to copy the mana body samples blindly, but their completion rate wouldn't be high. Naturally, a low completion rate would severely affect one's combat power. A player's mana body would affect their control with their skills and spells in the future. A poorly constructed mana body would result in low mana conductibility. This would limit players' ability to use Tier 3 skills and spells with a completion rate of 90% or higher, since players had to actively guide and control their mana during the process to amplify their skills or spells' power. This was also why experts in Xiaofan's previous life had preferred to aim for less complex mana bodies to ensure high completion rates, rather than aim for a more complex mana body with a low completion rate. If players constructed a perfect mana body, it wouldn't negatively affect their combat power, which would be a significant help when challenging their Tier 4 promotion quests in the future. Xiaofan spent around 10 minutes inspecting the 3 mana body samples he had been given. Although the advanced mana body is extremely complex and even involves multi-line mana manipulation, I have 5 hours to play around with. I should give it a try. Having made his decision, Xiaofan focused on the advanced mana body sample and began to manipulate the mana within him. There might not be a huge difference between an intermediate mana body's environmental adaptability and that of an advanced mana body, but the difference between the 2 options' recovery rates and defense was massive. Naturally, players' defense would undergo a considerable transformation when they reached Tier 3 and obtained their mana body. Their toughness as a Tier 2 player couldn't even compare. With a mana body, a layer of protective mana would envelop their frame, making them less prone to physical injury, which would reduce their combat power from ordinary attacks. Naturally, the higher the mana body's rank was, the stronger this protective layer would be. It would also help players recover from physical injuries much faster. Time flew by. After nearly 20 minutes, Xiaofan had finally finished constructing his first mana body. Xiaofan could feel himself grow much stronger the instant he completed his mana body. Now, the surrounding mana actively flowed into him, giving him a mentally refreshed feeling. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 64%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? I barely passed. Sure enough, the advanced mana body isn't easy to construct. Xiaofan gave the completion rate a bitter smile. But to think that this mana body is so powerful despite a 64% completion rate, an epic mana body is really amazing. Normally, a mana body with a 60% completion rate was only considered passable. If one failed to achieve a passing completion rate in the designated time, they'd be stuck with the default mana body. With the default option, achieving a 90% completion rate with Tier 3 skills and spells would be practically impossible. Players typically needed a 75% completion rate mana body to ensure their skills and spells would remain unaffected. In the past, Xiaofan had constructed his bronze mana body with a 95% completion rate. At that standard, a direct hit from a mysterious iron weapon had, at most, left a small scratch, hardly affecting his combat power. However, he didn't have much hope of achieving a 95% completion rate with his mana body in this life. An epic mana body was simply too complex. His only goal was to get an 80% completion rate to avoid any negative effects to his combat power. Even with an 80% completion rate with an epic mana body, only secret silver weapons and better would be capable of physically injuring him. Xiaofan then started his second attempt. After the first attempt, he chose not to focus on speed. Rather, he took great care, slowly constructing the mana body. After more than half an hour, Xiaofan had ended up with a 72% completion rate, just short of the 75% threshold. Xiaofan invested a full hour for his third attempt, but he had only earned a 74% completion rate. What am I missing? He began to grow frustrated as he examined the advanced mana body sample again. He had already spent nearly half of his allotted time, yet he hadn't constructed an adequate advanced mana body. If he continued to waste time, he wouldn't even have enough time to attempt the intermediate mana body's construction. He had performed every step with great precision, yet he still only achieved a 74% completion rate. During his previous life, he hadn't been anywhere near the refinement realm standard, yet he had still managed a 95% completion rate with his mana body. However, even as a domain realm expert, he had only reached a 74% completion rate. It was unbelievable. No, that's not right. Xiaofan suddenly snapped out of his daze. My mana manipulation hadn't been nearly as refined as it is now. I had glossed over some of the construction processes then, yet I still earned a 95% completion rate. This mana body sample is far more complex, but with my current standards, it shouldn't be this hard to achieve the same results. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Is my thirst for perfection having the opposite effect? Thinking up to this point, Xiaofan began another attempt. This time, instead of trying to perfect all aspects of the construction process, he focused on certain parts, while glossing over the rest. This time, he completed the mana body in less than half an hour. The instant he completed his mana body, his 5 senses underwent a qualitative transformation. His affinity with the ambient mana skyrocketed. System, mana body constructed. Completion rate 91%. Do you wish to keep this mana body? You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.